Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
Anybody in this country doesn't minimise their tax. They want their heads ring.
Socialists don't like ordinary people choosing, or they might not choose socialism.
The answer is might, because I want to do you slowly. I want to do you slowly. I was saved by God to make America great again.
We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Well, thank you all for coming today. Events like this are incredibly important to make a statement about things that are happening in our country. Just like people who have been rallying recently, these events are also incredibly important, especially when we have some great speakers with some great information. I do want to thank our speakers today. Thank you for coming. We have Ben Beattie, Senator Malcolm Roberts, Colin Boyce, Glenda, Pickersgill. We also have Nick Jorss from Coal Australia here today, so thank you, Nick, for coming. And again, thank you to all of you. I also like to acknowledge the Let's Rethink Renewables committee who have helped to put this event together today. So we've got a great lineup, so it should be a great day of important information. It is being broadcast. We will be recording it and putting up on Commanding the Narrative. So if you want to head to commandingthenarrative.com, you'll see that footage up probably next week. So you'll be able to watch it back and share it out to people. So as I said, this event's put on today by Let's Rethink Renewables. You can also sign up to be a member of Let's Rethink Renewables just by heading to the website letsrethinkrenewables.org, and you can download our prospectus as well. It's a PDF document that you can share out and send to people. Also want to acknowledge Australians for Better Government, who are also here today. They're not contributing to this event, but we like to support other groups that do good work. So please head to australiansforbetter.com and check out everything that is happening with Australians for Better Government. It's all about reforming our system of government. It's not a political party. It's just based on purely our system of government. And also Australians for Australia. Deborah's got a great table over there if you want to check out her information. They're doing some great work to promote some really good candidates at different elections. So please head to their information, their website at Australians for Australia. So let's kick things off with our first speaker. It's Ben Beattie. Now he's an electrical engineer with 2 decades of experience in power and gas sectors. He wrote a chapter in Professor Ian Plimer's book, The End of the World. He's a regular contributor to The Spectator Australia, and he consulted on Chris Uhlmann's documentary, The Real Cost of Net Zero. And of course, he's the host of the Baseload podcast. Please welcome Ben Beattie.
G'day everybody, thanks for coming. Thank you, Stephen, for having me. It's going to be a good few minutes, my talk, and thank you everyone else for coming here as well. It's good to see everyone paying some attention these days. My talk today is very boldly titled The Myth of Cheap Renewables. Now, there are some great presentations coming today talking about some environmental and some political impacts of these renewables policies that we have, but there's not a lot of people able to sort of articulate some of the issues with the cost. And I've spent a few years now trying to get to the bottom of it, looking at the data, looking at the policies and checking out the evidence of it all. So hopefully today I can not force you into accepting my opinions, but perhaps give you some ideas and things to talk about with your friends, some points to mull over, and maybe some facts to sort of ground your arguments in a little bit. So here we go. When I think about my electricity bill, I think about the structures of it. There's a whole supply chain behind your electricity bill. It's not displayed well in electricity bills. In other countries, actually, my brother lives in America, in Maryland and DC, and I got him to send his bill, and there's about 15 different line items in it. And it's all the subsidies and the taxes and the fees from this and that. But we don't really get that over here, and that's something that we should all be asking for change. But what's actually happening in the background, You've got the cost of generating it, you've got the cost of moving it, you've got some arbitrary sort of levies and fees, and then you've got the retailers, they have overheads, they have people and meters. So all those costs come into our bill, and the more we look at it, the better. So I just like to ask people, which part of our bill do renewables make cheaper? And which part of the bill do renewables make more expensive? And that's actually an interesting question when you get to it. So we are constantly told by several of the people of these headshots that industrial wind and solar, I'm not going to call them wind farms or solar farms or even renewables that much. They're just, for me, it's an industrial wind site and an industrial solar site. So we're told that they're the cheapest. I just did a quick Google search and I put Chris Bowen and renewables are cheap in the title, and it came up with 100,000 hits. And that's just a small selection. Up here we have Albo, we all know him. We all know Chris Bowen. We all know the opposition, Ted, Energy Minister, and Susan Lee. Up here we have John Grimes, the head of the Smart Energy Council. Now, Chris Bowen is rarely seen without this guy these days. So you can draw whatever conclusions you need to from that. And obviously, Mr. Holmes at court up there behind the teal candidates, who are basically one or two position people like the Zali Steggles, and all they can talk about is more renewables. They don't have any facts behind their arguments. They just like to talk about it. I have a short video here, Mr. Bowen.
Asked by Peter Dutton in question time today, and not answered by the Prime Minister, was what is the total cost of the government's energy plan? Is there a straight answer to that question?
$121 billion is the cost of non-customer-owned generation, transmission and storage, as is outlined in great detail in the last version of the Integrated Systems Plan. That'll be updated later this week. That's the figure.
So there you have it, $121 billion. Now this video admittedly is about a year and a half old, but I do have to give credit to Sarah Ferguson, Mrs. Jones, for asking the right question. This is a question we'd all like to hear more of, right? And we'd also like for people to ask Mr. Bowen what it is. Now he's talking about some funny figures there, net present values, which is like if you had $121 billion today and you invested it at 7% interest, at the end of that period, that's what it actually cost. That's kind of what he's talking about there. So the way I'm going to talk to you about this stuff today is what I see as the three main problems in the cost structures of the renewables argument. First of all, I've got what I call a missing money, followed by massive spending and the disappearing middle. Now, these are somewhat esoteric concepts at the moment, but hopefully a couple of charts and some good philosophical discussions about it will help us get there. Missing money. So missing money starts with rooftop solar and home batteries. On this chart, you'll see this is just a representation across time of, I think this one might be the Queensland electricity grid. So you can see in the daytime, you've got all this rooftop solar and a bit extra generation. The black is coal. The purple is imports and exports, green is wind, blue is hydro, and the bit of orange in the middle there is gas. So you can see during the day we've got a lot of solar, there's some wind, most of the time it's coal. It's the up and downs that are the problem. So normally, like 15 years ago, this solar section would be filled with coal. That's a lot of market share that's gone from the baseload generators. And this is at the heart of the economic problem of why it's going to be Nick Jorss might argue with me about it, but I don't think anyone in the private sector would be willing to bite off this disappearing market share for a baseload generator. They're going to need some help. Excuse me. So the missing money is all about this rooftop solar section, and you can see it's an increasing slab of the electricity system. Now, Chris Bowen is now embarked on his $2.3 billion battery subsidy, which is going to eat into that market share even more. So he's just the other day he was boasting about 50,000 home battery systems installed in the 4 weeks since the policy had been announced, since the 1st of July. Now, if you buy a battery and solar system, you're not doing this because you want to pay more money to an electricity company. You're doing it because you want to pay less, right? You're not going to do it because you want to increase your bills. You want to reduce your bills. If you stop paying bills into the electricity system, which all still exist out there, nothing's being decommissioned or reduced, there's more and more of it. If there's less people contributing to that infrastructure, well, who's actually paying? Well, the poor sods who can't opt out of it, right? So that might be people who can't afford batteries and solar, people whose facility can't actually have it installed. For example, if you're in a city and living in an apartment, people at retirement homes, it's just not going to happen, right? So there's a whole market segment which is being bifurcated. We're seeing some people opt out and everyone else is just left with the cost. Now, the problem with that cost is that it's not getting less. This is the official plan. This is a chart out of the Integrated System Plan 2024. What you can see here in green is something like 50 or 60 gigawatts of wind turbines. Here you have another 50 or 60 gigawatts of industrial solar. So that's 100 plus gigawatts more of generation that all the people on the previous slide have opted out of paying for. So all this extra stuff, we're down here in sort of 2020-ish, 2020, 25 in here. This is the plan. And opting out of paying for that infrastructure means that it has to be paid for by less people. And that's very unfortunate. Now, some of the slides today will talk about the transmission rollout, and you can see this is what they're talking about. It's everywhere. Queensland, Victoria, New South Wales, Tasmania, even poor old Bass Strait gets a look in. So that's how I go from the missing money, which is the people opting out, exacerbated by massive spending in the system with generators and networks. And there's fewer and fewer people left to pay for it. This is a chart from AEMO's Integrated System Plan. These thousands over here in the millions, so 5,000 million is 5 billion. So 20,000 million is 20 billion. And over here, even if you just look at these dark purple ones, which is generator capital, this is your industrial wind and solar. This is what they're planning to spend on wind and solar. By 2032, they're saying it's got to be minimum 10 billion per year. And it never comes down. It just keeps going up and up and up. And this chart stops at 2050. God knows what it's going to be like in the future beyond that. So this is the kids and the grandkids are looking at this stuff going, oh, well, we've been doing this for the last 30 years. Why don't we just keep doing it? And this is one of the problems that we have. If we don't speak up and get something done about it now, this is the stuff that's going to be locked in for a generation. Chris Bowen was on a Dan Illick podcast, an ABC, former ABC comedian, I think, and boasting that in this term, his main priority is locking it in so that it can't be undone. So this really worries me. So yeah, you can see that if you've got a bunch of people installing home batteries and solar back here, well, for the next 10 years, they're not paying for any of this. And those people then who have not had to pay an electricity bill for a decade will then be in an even better position to increase their system because it'll all cost less, and so they will still not be paying anything for it out here in the 2040s. Only the people who can't opt out of that will be paying for it. So missing money on top of a massive spending. And I put this chart together about 6 months ago because I thought, I wonder what it looks like comparing the total installed capacity here in the blue versus the actual peak demand of the system in orange versus the average cost per year in the wholesale market. And most people look at in a supply-demand situation and go, well, if we're getting more and more supply in the blue, for not much more demand in the orange, the price should go down. It's the opposite. And there's good reasons for that, like we've talked about. So yeah, this is the Australian Energy Regulator's data. So any of these bureaucrats who say, "Oh, that's not right," well, they can have to go back and change their data because that's their data. Okay, the disappearing middle. So this one gets a bit more tricky to visualise, but I'll see if I can explain it. This is Queensland. The way the generators, the big generators, offer their electricity into the system, it's not arbitrary. They say, well, I've got this much capacity and you can have it for this much money, and then I've got a bit much more capacity so you can have it for this much money. And they build this stack of generator bids, and at the end of the day, every 5 minutes you get a clearing price based on how these generators sell electricity in the market and how the system dispatches it. This side over here is from 2010, and the middle bit here is $0 to $100 a megawatt hour. So that was the capacity available in 2010 in Queensland of electricity at $0 to $100 a megawatt hour. This is below zero, and this one's above 100. What you can see now is in 2024 is that you're losing these middle bids. They're going out of the market. Now this is because the coal-fired generators, back to the market share problem, if they're the same asset and they need to make the same amount of money every year to keep this coal-fired power station healthy and maintaining and keep replacing pumps when they break and keep the electricians serviced and keep their compliance up, they've got all these fixed costs. In the real world, if you've got a certain amount of cost, but you've got less opportunity to sell it, well then each time you sell it, you're going to have to sell it for a little bit more. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. You can see more of the black, which is the coal, up in the top part, which is the expensive stuff. And down here in the bottom, you've got the yellow, which is the industrial solar, and the green is the industrial wind, filling up the bottom part of the bids. Now, you might be tempted to look at that and say, well, negative priced electricity is good for the system, but it's not. Someone's still paying. We're separate to all this. That's got nothing to do with us. This is the wholesale market. These guys here are sold on contract and not making, they're making their money regardless of what the wholesale price is. Your coal-fired generators, lost my clicker. The coal-fired generators need that market share to get their product sold. So this is where we have a problem in the wholesale market. So I call that the disappearing middle. So on top of consumers, more and more consumers getting their solar and batteries, which is eroding the market share, then we have all the new wind and solar projects coming online in the transmission line, massive spending. We also have not much electricity being offered at reasonable prices. It's becoming less and less. So in the wholesale market, it's going to get more expensive. And I think this might be on my final slide. Sorry, Steve, I can see he's ready to wrap me up. The volatility in the wholesale market is causing problems for the retailers, because the retailers buy their electricity in advance at a certain price. But if you can see the electricity market spreading with this red line here, and the market cap's increasing, the electricity ends up costing more overall. So your retailers have to charge more. So I understand some of these charts are a bit weird, but happy to talk about them for the rest of the day and see if we can get some of those points through. So at the end of the day, for me, this is a really simple message that I like to ask. So which part of my bill do renewables make more expensive, and which part do they make cheaper? Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. That was great stuff. A lot of great information in there. Now we're moving on to someone who's completely different than the technical stuff, and it's, I guess, a big reason why we are doing Let's Rethink Renewables is because a lot of the city areas, they're not seeing what's happening out in rural communities where a lot of this stuff is being put. And what we're trying to do with these events is bring people from the rural areas to the cities to let the city people know what's really happening. And one of them is Glenda Pickersgill. She's from Save Lake Borumba. She's going to be letting you know what's happening there. So please welcome Glenda.
Thank you very much. Yes, I guess we're a little bit different in the country. It gives me great pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much for coming. I'm a grazier from the Mary Valley, and I've been involved with looking after our Mary River for many, many years. I was involved in the Traveston Crossing Dam proposal that overturned that decision to build a dam on the Mary River, and it's very, very close to my heart. Now, the Borumba pumped hydro energy storage project should never, ever have got off the drawing board, and the transmission lines associated with it. Even with the revisiting the project, which is happening at the moment, and I'll go into much more detail soon, this area should be protected. It should be a no-go zone for any pumped hydro proposal. The idea of having pumped hydro on a main river system is very, very risky. It's not going to give us cheaper electricity, and it does put biodiversity we value and the Wide Bay region communities at risk. And that's what I'll talk about today. Hands up how many people know where Lake Borumba is? Well, a few. It's a beautiful place, a very popular boating, camping and fishing area. About 3 hours drive north of here. And this is where they're proposing to put a pumped hydro system. So just to locate you a little bit better, everyone probably knows about Fraser Island. At the mouth of Fraser Island, we've got the Ramsar, at the bottom of Fraser Island, we've got the Ramsar wetlands. And then we've got the Mary River, which comes right back down south. And this is where Lake Borumba is. That's the project proposal site there. So we've got World Heritage areas. We've got the Mary River, which actually flows into the Great Barrier Reef. So we've got a World Heritage area there. We've got matters of environmental significance, and I'll go into a little bit more detail soon, in the river. And up at the actual dam site itself, so there we have the dam shaded in pink. All around it, we've got beautiful forest. We've got Conedale National Park. We've got Rattans National Park. We've got Yabba State Forest, which will soon become into the Rattans National Park area. As a national park, it'll be Yabba Links National Park. And we've got Imbil State Forest. So as you can imagine, it's quite a beautiful place. And if there was ever a project that shouldn't go ahead because of environmental reasons, it's a no-go zone. So what's happened is originally it was announced a couple of years ago that the cost of it climbed from $12 billion up to $18 billion, and we had a change in government. LNP state government now has announced that it was too expensive. We want to get it up to $18 billion, and they would hand it over to, in June this year, that they transferred it through to the Queensland Investment Corporation. So Queensland Hydro was is a Queensland state government organisation that was put in place to progress the Borumba pumped hydro project and the Pioneer Burdekin project up north. That one got cancelled when the LNP came into power in the state. But they said that they would continue to look at Borumba. And it's being looked at from a refreshed business case, and that should tie in about the middle of next year. So from a $18 billion project, which we didn't have the transparency to see what exactly that entailed. The detailed analytical report was shuffled into cabinet. That they're now proposing to look at about 22 different options. So, and nobody knows what the detail is. It's all kept very, very tight and secretive. But when you look at the numbers, the economics of Borumba, it doesn't stack up. We've got just benchmarking against some other estimates on what the cost should be. So we look at dollars per kilowatt hour or dollars per kilowatts. And Borumba is at the second column on the left there. $383 per kilowatt hour for capital costs. This is just the capital costs. CSIRO Gen Cost report looks at batteries, and they're saying batteries at the moment come in at around about $285. So already the battery costs are less than what is proposed on the $18 billion proposal. Even looking at the pumped hydro energy storage systems from CSIRO Gen Cost estimates, it comes way below what Borumba was costing at. Blakers in 2025 did a great review of pumped hydro systems, and their conclusions were you don't put pumped hydro on a river system. It's too risky. You go off river to do them. So his estimate, again, is much, much lower than what Borumba was. And the Pioneer Burdekin one, which was actually stopped by the LNP government because of the cost, it was less than what Borumba was. So why are they still pursuing this idea at Borumba? World biggest pumped hydro was how it was put across. And if we look at big pumped hydro that's actually in place in China, comparing similar sizes and costings, even against the Snowy 2 pumped hydro project, which is in the process of being built, it's about the same power generation size, but it's just way, way, way more expensive. And we know what problems the Snowy Hydro scheme has got. So this is the existing Lake Borumba, the Borumba Wall, which does have problems. This lake or this dam was built back in the 60s, so dams are never built forever. They only last 70 to 100 years and they start to have some real safety problems. This has come up to its 60th year and it's been identified in audits that they have to do something about the spillway, about the wall, to bring it into large dam safety guidelines, the NCOLD guidelines. But it's not just Borumba, it's the Wivenhoe Dam, it's the Somerset Dam. They've all got these problems. So one of the 6 options that the SEQ Water were looking at, one of the 6 was what they were proposing with the Borumba Pumped Hydro project, was building a wall 300 metres downstream, 20 metres higher, take out all that lovely rainforest in the background there, very steep country, very, very steep country, and it would increase the lower reservoir 5 times bigger. And the top reservoir would be about 300 metres higher than the bottom reservoir, so that's the existing Lake Borumba, so it'd be 300 metres higher up on the back of where those mountains are. Oh, no. Is it going to give it to me? Yeah, back up the top there. Would require 6 dam walls to be built to get the volume, and would be about 1.5 times the size of the existing lake itself at the moment, in beautiful habitat for koalas and greater gliders. You couldn't pick a worse position to put a project from an animal point of view. So what was proposed was a 2 gigawatt capacity 24-hour system, the generation, a powerhouse that would be 400 metres underground, have 6 turbines similar to the Snowy system, and there's no country on earth is currently operating a 48 gigawatt hour pumped hydro storage system. This is a big, very big project with lots and lots of risks. So 7 dam structures it was proposed to have, and 2 spillways, one of which was 100 metres high on the top reservoir, requiring enormous amounts of material to be moved, enormous amounts of concrete to be prepared. The exploration works, which you think about exploration works, they divide the project into 2, exploration works and the main works. Exploration works, you think of, oh yeah, it's a few drills and they're going to look at the hydrology and the geology. But in reality, what they're proposing was really starting the project to actually build the tunnel down into where the powerhouse was planned to be. The inlet, this is not what was proposed for Borumba, but it's a Snowy 2 inlet where they take the water before they pump it up to the top reservoir. But a similar thing would have been required for Borumba, but they would not reveal any detail about that. But we're talking a massive, massive project, huge social risks. This is the existing Lake Borumba here. Downstream we've got Imbil, which is situated here. Further downstream we've got Gympie. I'm in between the two on my property. The existing dam, you only have 1 to 3 hours. If something goes wrong at that wall, 1 to 3 hours, and all the shaded area in red is covered in water. Gympie, the water gets to in 6 hours. And that's only a small Lake Borumba, 50 gigalitres of water there. What we're talking about with this project proposal is 5 times that volume in that bottom reservoir and 1.5 times the volume 300 metres higher. Can you imagine what the risks that is being placed on those people down below, myself included? I would lose everything, my business, my house. I'm in the path of if anything goes wrong. But they'd never, even though the studies were done in 2022, they would never reveal what the dam break study would show as to how much would get flooded in what time frame. Okay. But still, even though it's on hold at the moment, being reviewed for a business case, there's still some spending going on, and there's been quite a lot of spending in the last couple of years. And there's still lots of scientific information that is unknown. The groundwater hydrology, the geology, the sediment impacts, the water quality risks, even just the emissions that occur from a project like this. Nothing's been revealed. No detail at all has been revealed. And what could go wrong? Above Borumba, Lake Borumba is the types of soils that are very dispersive. And when they get dispersive, they've got high sodium content, they get dispersive and they get colloidal and they get suspended. And therefore they can get carried down through a river system very, very quickly. Great example already we know is the Burdekin Falls Dam, which was built back in 1987. The river's never been the same. There's high levels in the backcountry of Borumba. There's high levels of manganese and nickel. Already in the sediments, we know that there's elevated levels. Fish kills always are associated with dam building. The water, you've got emerged organic soils that break down. Got methane, we've got, we've talked about that one. Go back one. Costs are being underestimated. Construction costs are continuing to go up, whereas alternatives like battery technology is certainly coming down, and better technology as well. So going away so much from nickel to, vanadium and so forth. There'll be quite a few options that are coming forward. Methyl mercury is another issue. Landslips in the very, very steep country at the back of Borumba Dam. So the project was called in as a controlled action under the Environment Protection Biodiversity Conservation Act because of the species that are put at risk, and but at this stage there's been no approvals, and now how can they give approvals when the project is being completely revisited? But still they continue to push ahead with the transmission lines. For example, last week we had to do submissions, even though it's the horse before the it's the cart before the horse in approvals. If they start to work on the transmission lines before they actually know what the project is. Borumba, the Borumba Pumped Hydro project they've put into the integrated systems plans, which Ben spoke a little bit about, and as an anticipated project, but really it's got no legs at the moment. It's undefined. The only thing I pick up from this slide here is about smart meters. Ben didn't talk about smart meters, but smart meters are certainly, they've legislated now that they've got to come in by 2030 is in the rules, and so that whole system of being able to feed back solar into your into the system, where they're only offering 3 cents a kilowatt hour and then selling it to you for 25 cents, it's, us as consumers are really, really being sold a lemon. Because I want to get on to just a couple of things of what's special about the Mary. We have some really special creatures in the Mary, endangered species, and I'm a scientist by trade as well as a grazier. We do studies on the Mary River turtle, the Mary River cod, the lungfish. They only occur in that Mary River system, and they're long-lived. These critters can be up to 100 years old. Okay, yep. This is some work that I also do on my property, flooding effects and restoration work, and my house is sitting up there, just there. So if anything was to go wrong with Borumba, the Lake Borumba at the moment, it would be lapping at my doorstep. And this is what our community faces. Our rural community faces these risks. Social licence. We don't have social licence for these projects. They're trying to sell, they're trying to give some money into the community, trying to buy social licence is the way I look at it. So I guess my key message is that the Mary River catchment has never ever seen a proposal the size of this. And they're talking about the biggest world sized project. It's just sheer scale of complexity and risks of what can go wrong. Lots of unknowns financially, socially and environmentally. And coupled with this undue haste to get this project operational within very unlikely timeframes. It's got no social licence, no federal government approval, and it's going to need a lot of our taxpayers' money to ever, ever, ever get it off the ground. Thank you.
the end, yeah. Yeah, speaking of questions, we will have a Q&A at the end, and during the intermission you'll be able to go up the back and write your questions down on the notepad up there. I'll explain a little bit as we go along. Before we move to the next speaker, I just want to let you know about the Commanding the Narrative website. Now this is where this event today will be broadcast, so if you're hearing some information that you'd like to re-listen to or maybe share out to your friends, head to commandingthenarrative.com, and as I said, it will be posted in the next week or so. Also, you would have received flyers to the national survey. Now, that survey has been put together by two great people, Sasha McNaughton of Let's Rethink Renewables and Deborah Yule of Australians for Australia, and they've asked me to host that survey on the Commanding the Narrative website. So again, head to that website and you'll be able to find that survey there, and you'll also be able to find the footage here from today as well. All right, moving on to our next speaker. Now, when he was elected to Parliament, I think this issue of net zero and the renewables rollout was at the top of his mind, about one of the issues that he wanted to tackle when he got into Parliament, and he's been working tirelessly ever since then, trying to find the empirical scientific evidence for this mad rush to net zero. And I think a lot of the time, as this debate has gone along, we forget how this all started. This all started with the belief and the alarmism that somehow carbon dioxide is going to be pushing up temperatures to insane levels, that the whole world was going to fall over and die. And I think we've forgotten about that argument, and we've moved on to other things like energy and so forth. But this man here has been working tirelessly in the background trying to get those answers from government, and I don't know how successful he's been, but he's going to let us know about it today. Please welcome Senator Malcolm Roberts.
That's not my speech. Love, care, and reason. They're traits unique to our human species. Everyone in this room is proof that humans care. We survived years of infancy and childhood when completely dependent, completely helpless. I want to thank you for being here. And I want to thank Let's Rethink Renewables, the organisers, the speakers, the audience, the viewers, my wife Christine for letting me have time off, and Pauline. Senator Pauline Hanson is the only member of Parliament, the only politician who didn't run for my climate work in the 2010s. She came to me. So I'm actually excited, because this is about restoring human potential and progress. I'm proud to be here because we all have pride in our country and are worried about its current path. We all want our bloody country to be much, much better, don't we? Yes. So I'll clarify my speech's goal for you. The one thing I want you to remember is there is no scientific proof, no policy basis for the climate and energy narratives and policies. None. None at all. There's no policy basis. Why does this matter? This matters because we value and care for our precious natural environment, and we love and admire humans and our human environment, don't we? The second thing I want everyone to remember is that we're told the biggest purchase of our life is our house. That's wrong. Taxes, fees, levies, special levies make our biggest purchase? Government. Are we getting value? Not at all. The direct cost of government is taxes. The direct cost of government waste is excessive taxes. The indirect cost of government is failed or destructive policies, choking productive capacity, driving waste, killing initiative, and killing our environment. 120 years ago, our country had the world's highest per capita income. What the hell happened? I'll share what I've done for 18 years on a key issue, climate fraud, in the Senate and before the Senate. Starting in 2007, I worked voluntarily for 9 years researching climate science, pursuing, as Steve said, empirical data in logical points to understand cause and effect. Then I researched the corruption of climate science. That led to the UN. Then I researched the drivers behind the UN's climate policies. The World Bank, the IMF, World Economic Forum, global banks, global wealth funds like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Then to motives and to beneficiaries, stealing money from taxpayers, all of us. I held people accountable, politicians, journalists, academics, agencies. Then for another 9 years, from 2016, as a senator, I held organisations and ministers accountable, climate and energy agencies, departments, using my initiative, question time, Senate estimates, speeches and letters. So I've written a speech because today I'll be covering a lot of ground and want to respect your time. So what's the core climate claim? What is it? Climate alarmists claim that carbon dioxide from human use of hydrocarbon fuels, that's coal, oil and natural gas, and from farming animals for food is raising atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, which they claim will raise temperature for catastrophic warming in some distant, unspecified time. That's the basis for claimed solutions with devastating impacts on society. Taxing and controlling farming and food to stop raising animals, including stealing property rights to control land use and control citizens. Taxing and controlling our use of energy. Pursuing UN Sustainable Development Goals to control every aspect of our life, people's lifestyle and life, what we eat, how we travel, what energy we use, finances, homes, all claim to be based on science. So what's science? Well, when done properly, science investigates and explains our physical world. Science is the systematic, objective study of our physical world through observation, experimentation, and testing of theories against the empirical data. Hard data in logical scientific points proving cause and effect. In other words, scientific proof needs data in logical points proving cause and effect. Graduate engineers like me are trained in science because we apply the science. We understand scientific proof because it ensures we keep people safe and protect lives. Flying in aircraft, crossing border on bridges, going underground in tunnels, using chemicals, using electrical machines, driving cars, building dams. My science training includes geology, atmospheric gases and statistics, three of the most important topics of climate science. To understand empirical data, we need to understand variation. It's fundamental, and most people don't. There's variation in everything. Now, there are two basic types of variation. Inherent natural variation, which is just a stable system. Process change, when you get a kick up or a trend up. Plus cycles, some daily cycles, which we all know about. And then there's some cycles, 150 million years, that are galactic cycles that affect our climate on this planet. Now, time frames are important for studying variation. Daily variation in temperatures is huge. Seasonal variations can be large, yet over a 30-year climate cycle, temperature may be consistent. So let's define the problem. Every person, business, employer, uses and relies on electricity, petrol, diesel, correct? Energy at home and at work. Australia has gone from having the most affordable power to having one of the world's highest power prices. The key to global competitive advantage is having the lowest power price. China uses our coal, taken from Queensland, railed, transported at ports, shipped thousands of kilometres, transported it at ports again in China and moved hundreds of kilometres inland, uses our coal to generate electricity for 12 cents a kilowatt hour. We have none of those transport costs, and we pay 26 to 33 cents a kilowatt hour. Double to triple what the Chinese pay for their electricity prices. So why? Let's consider Parliament. From 1996 to 2007, John Howard's Liberal National Government committed to comply with the UN Kyoto Protocol, introducing his solar and wind renewable energy target. His national electricity market, that's really a national bureaucratic racket. Stealing farmers' property rights to comply with the UN, and being the first major party to promise a carbon dioxide tax. All claim to be based on science, climate science. Yet 6 years later, the same man in 2013 admitted in distant London, far off London, that on, quote, on the topic of climate science, he is agnostic. He did not have the science. No science. Since then, the LNP has introduced every major climate and energy policy, and Labor has come in and ramped them up. As a senator, I wrote letters to 10 members of Parliament, all confirmed in writing back to me that they had never been given scientific proof. Never. That's your parliamentarians talking, including Colin Boyce, one of the few with honesty and integrity. And I acknowledge Colin for that. I wrote letters to another 19 senators who advocate cutting carbon dioxide from human activity. 4 replied out of 19. None provided scientific proof. Not one. Now, these are the papers that I was given as evidence of climate change and needing to cut carbon dioxide by Senator Jenny McAllister, who has been until recently Assistant Minister for Climate Change in the Labor Party. She got into Parliament, became a senator based upon her climate work for policy research. So what I've done is I've continued requesting proof that human carbon dioxide, not natural, causes climate change. She said, Jenny McAllister said, quote, "Here are the 20 most cited peer-reviewed papers about climate change and its effects, compiled by Thomson Reuters so that people can get started." So I read all 25 of Senator McAllister's listed papers. She gave me the 20 plus another 5. None contained specific scientific proof that carbon dioxide from human activity affects climate. If she had read the papers, she clearly does not understand cause and effect, a basic trait and aim of science. Fundamental. Absurdly, her list contains the titles of 9 papers that reveal those papers deal with the effects of climate change. Not the cause, the effects of any claimed climate change. From the titles, it's bloody obvious. Listen to this. Biological responses to climate change on a tropical mountain. What the hell does that say about cause? Nothing. Ecological responses to recent climate change. Ecological and evolutionary responses to recent climate change. Fingerprints of global warming on wild animals and plants. What does that tell us about causes and effects? Absolutely nothing about cause, nothing. Extinction risks from climate change. That's just named 5 of them. That confirms that Senator McAllister does not understand what constitutes scientific proof. So I requested proof that human carbon dioxide causes damaging climate change, not the effects of claimed climate change. This is fundamental. Fundamental. 11 of her papers rely on unvalidated numerical computer models, not empirical scientific data. Some papers reinforce natural drivers of climate variability. Some of the papers actually reinforce that it's not humans, it's natural drivers. She handed that to me as proof. One paper questions the existence of anthropogenic global warming or climate change. Did she read the bloody papers? Or did she merely rely on Thomson Reuters? Do you know who Thomson Reuters are? A mainstream media organisation. That's all they are. They're not scientific. 12 papers discuss natural phenomena in ways that are either misrepresented or not verified. This is bullshit. 11 papers make unfounded claims without empirical scientific evidence. Some lack evidence for their conclusions on the title subject. That's what the minister gave me. Next one. Prime Minister Morrison broke his pre-election commitment to not adopt net zero. Remember that? And what did he do? He adopted net zero. In his 2019 election campaign, Prime Minister Scott Morrison promised he would not adopt net zero. Yet around 18 months after the election, and on his return from the United Nations Conference of Parties 26th Climate Conference, he broke his promise and declared his government would implement net zero. In subsequent Senate estimates hearings, his government's committee chair, Senator Zed Sejelja, a nice bloke, could not specify to me any change in science driving the change in policy. He looked like a real turkey. He was left like a shag on a rock. There is no science based on which is based the change in policy. You can see a transcript of my session with Senator Zed Sejelja on YouTube. Morrison's Liberal national net zero policy is not based on scientific proof. Next, closer to home. Nationals MPs Barnaby Joyce and Senator Matt Canavan. In the years leading to 2013, the then Senator Barnaby Joyce was, at the time, Australia's most colourful and effective Member of Parliament, speaking out against the absurdity of the climate narrative. He was bloody good. His Chief of Staff was Matt Canavan, who replaced Mr Joyce in the Senate when Mr Joyce moved to the House of Representatives, and Matt was also known to be sceptical of climate narrative. In the 2016 election campaign, though Mr Joyce's campaign seeked to represent New England electorate, embraced and endorsed the then Prime Minister Turnbull's massive $400 million election sweetener to build wind turbines in New England. Remember that? Mr Joyce implied that he believed in the climate narrative now, without citing new scientific evidence for his change to support the climate narrative. Barnaby's a nice bloke. Matt's a nice bloke. But we need more than niceness. Then as we applied political pressure, so he's gone from being a climate realist to a climate alarmist. Then as we applied political pressure in recent years, Mr Joyce swung back to questioning the climate and energy narrative. Welcome back, Barnaby. Again, he cited no new evidence for his change back to his original position on climate. None. Although I certainly commend him for his latest reversal and return to his original position of climate scepticism. Similarly, Senator Canavan, one of the most intelligent, personable MPs and parliamentary performers, changed his stance from opposing the climate scam to supporting the climate narrative, and later now has reversed his position to swing back to question the climate narrative. Highly intelligent people, both of them, good people. Again, Matt cited no new evidence for his changes of position. But I commend him as well as Barnaby for his latest reversal and return to his original position. The Greens. The Greens and others refused to debate me. Larissa Waters in 2010, in 2016, and repeatedly from 2019 in the Senate. Waters is a lawyer and makes many false and unsubstantial claims and misrepresents climate. She has never provided scientific proof, never. Members of Parliament like David Pocock show no understanding of science. His donors include Climate 200 with huge conflicts of interest. They invoke so-called experts and other logical fallacies. They use emotion, especially fear and catchy slogans. They have no scientific proof, none. The Greens repeatedly lie, misrepresent and sideline science with personal attacks. From 2007 to 2016, I sent hundreds of registered post letters to ministers and politicians. Most MPs don't even know what science is. Others lie, others are coward, gutless. That's what's happening in Parliament. So why? Why are these decent people doing this? I'm not including the Greens in decent people. Why? Let's see why they never present scientific proof. My 2013 Freedom of Information request revealed that no CSIRO chief executive had sent a climate report to any MPs, ministers of Parliament. Not one report to MPs from CSIRO. My 2013 letter to the CSIRO chief executive and to the head of CSIRO's climate team produced no scientific proof, and their replies were evasive. In 2016, in the Senate, my first action requested the CSIRO's climate team to provide scientific proof that human carbon dioxide needs to be cut. Pretty reasonable. Now, at CSIRO's first 3-hour presentation to me, CSIRO's climate chief stated, CSIRO has never stated that carbon dioxide from human activity is a danger. He said, quote, determination of danger is a matter for public and politicians. So it's up to you. Yet politicians say it's a danger and say that CSIRO advised them. CSIRO acknowledged to me the need for empirical data as scientific proof. They actually acknowledged that to me, yet failed to provide that proof that human carbon dioxide causes climate change. They failed. They admitted it. CSIRO admitted it lacks empirical data and logical scientific proof. You're paying these people taxes. Instead of physical data, CSIRO relied on unvalidated, erroneous computer models. After 50 years of so-called research, CSIRO presented just one paper on temperatures, Marcotte 2013. CSIRO used it to claim today's temperatures are unprecedented. Yet Marcotte himself had previously admitted Years ago, his paper's 20th century temperatures are not robust and are not representative of global temperature. CSIRO's temperature graphs were all over the place. Some showed the 1998 El Nino peak, which in other graphs disappeared. On carbon dioxide, CSIRO presented just one paper, Harry's 2001. It did not support CSIRO's claim of unprecedented levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. We made CSIRO aware of the paper's flaws that made it unscientific and statistically invalid. CSIRO admitted not doing due diligence on reports nor on external data that it relied on. No due diligence. At CSIRO's second 3-hour presentation, CSIRO confirmed today's temperatures are not unprecedented. There's nothing unusual going on. CSIRO presented Le Cavalier's 2017 paper on temperatures, which our team showed is hopelessly flawed. CSIRO acknowledged that, effectively withdrawing the paper, and the authors withheld from us data from our scrutiny. That means you don't even consider it. CSIRO presented a second paper on carbon dioxide, Feldman 2015. It refutes Harry's first paper that CSIRO gave us. We showed CSIRO that Feldman's paper too is flawed. CSIRO acknowledged that, effectively withdrawing it. 50 years of climate research. At CSIRO's third presentation, CSIRO claimed rates, and each of these presentations were 2.5, 3 hours long. CSIRO claimed rates of temperature increase are unprecedented. Yet NASA satellites reveal that temperatures are essentially flat, apart from El Nino peaks and La Nina troughs, just essentially flat overall for the last 30 years. CSIRO presented to us 5 new references on temperatures. Some contradicted the previous one, some contradicted each other, all were non-specific, scientifically useless. CSIRO has never specified the effect of human carbon dioxide on climate. Thus, there's no basis for policy cutting carbon dioxide. We devoted 8 bloody hours to listening to these people and cross-examining them, and CSIRO across 3 presentations with no scientific proof received from CSIRO. None. Clearly, CSIRO had never presented a climate report or presentation containing scientific proof. Clearly, no one had held CSIRO accountable on climate, ever. Yet the CSIRO chief executive at the time was paid, a couple of years later, was paid more than $1 million per year. Your money. Former CSIRO chief executive Dr. Megan Clark was on 2 banks' advisory boards, Bank of America Merrill Lynch and Rothschilds Australia, both seeking windfall profits from carbon dioxide trading. Aren't they conflicts of interest? At Senate estimates hearing, CSIRO has never presented scientific proof for Australia's climate and energy policies. Never. We need a real scientific debate that CSIRO and Parliament avoided. Next, let's move on to the Bureau of Meteorology, BOM. Yeah, I heard that. I agree. My 2013 Freedom of Information request revealed that BOM sent 17 documents to MPs and ministers. Many were just one-page, broad, general UN updates. None contained specific scientific proof. My 2013 letters to BOM executives produced no scientific proof and whose replies instead unscientifically claimed a consensus. That's the opposite of science. BOM has been exposed for tampering with temperature data repeatedly. For example, temperatures at Rutherglen Weather Station in Victoria were changed from a long-term cooling trend to a warming trend, concocted, and many other weather stations. Other temperature data adjustments have been made under the label homogenisation with no audit, fabricating warming. BOM displays omit the 1880s, 1890s that were significantly warmer than today. Heat waves back then were longer, hotter, and more frequent than today. In Senate estimates hearings, BOM has never presented scientific proof nor any scientific basis for climate policy. Next, we'll move on to the chief scientist. In 2017, I organised a personal meeting with Chief Scientist Alan Finkel and Science Minister Arthur Sinodinos. After taking just a few of our questions, Finkel looked at us and admitted he does not understand climate science. Fair enough. We don't expect him to know everything, yet governments used him repeatedly to publicly speak as if he was a climate expert, and that's how he spoke. But when held accountable, he told the truth, that he wasn't a climate expert. We then requested, and he promised, a 4-hour presentation and discussion covering scientific proof and specific references. A date was agreed. Soon after, he cancelled and failed to set a new date. No chief scientist has ever provided scientific proof. Let's have a look at the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the UNIPCC. Both parties, the Greens and Prime Ministers, cite UN IPCC reports as the basis for climate policy. The UN has no scientific proof for its claims of warming and climate change, and no specific effect of cutting human carbon dioxide. Thus, the UN has no basis for climate and energy policies cutting human carbon dioxide. None. I've read the bloody reports. There's nothing there. The UN has no scientific basis for its temperature targets, initially fabricated at 2 degrees Celsius and later dropped to 1.5 degrees. No basis. Both the UN IPCC chair and Prime Minister Kevin Rudd claim that 4,000 scientists said in the UN's 2007 report that human carbon dioxide caused global warming. Yet the UN's own report showed that only 5 UN reviewers endorsed the claim. Not 4,000, 5. And there's doubt they were even scientists. This is what is driving all this rubbish. CSIRO is a major contributor to UN climate reports. The fraud. UN climate research excludes natural drivers. See that big ball up in the sky during the day? Doesn't affect climate. The UN defines climate change as studying only theories of man-made climate change, ignoring and excluding natural drivers of climate. The key graph driving the UN's report was the infamous hockey stick temperature graph, scientifically proven to be fraudulent. Instead of scientific proof, the UN relies on unvalidated, erroneous computer models with outputs from models labelled data. That's their data. The UN told us that no UN report states that carbon dioxide is a pollutant, because it's not a pollutant except in politicians' speeches. UN lead authors rebelled against the UN's corruption of climate science, yet the media did not even report it. The UN, after initially hyping extreme weather to scare people globally, now projects no increase in so-called extreme weather events. The UN IPCC is a political entity pushing political goals. The senior UN bureaucrat, Maurice Strong, fabricated both global warming and later climate change. He stated his life's aims were to deindustrialise Western civilisation, so you're gone, Nick, and install an unelected socialist global government. Stated those aims. He said, quote, "Humanity is the enemy." He was a co-founder and director of the Chicago Climate Exchange, seeking to make trillions of dollars from global trading of carbon dioxide credits. Now do you get it? American police sought Maurice Strong for separate crimes, and he went into self-exile in China, a major beneficiary of the West's climate and energy policies. UN senior climate bureaucrats like Figueres and Edenhofer admit the climate agenda. They admit the climate agenda is not about the environment. It's about changing society and economics to, quote, a new world economic order. Their words. It's all about control and wealth transfer from we, the people, to globalist corporations, investment funds, banks, aligned billionaires in the UN. Let's move on to NASA. And NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, GISS. The head of NASA GISS Climate Group, Gavin Schmidt, admitted to me in writing, because I held him accountable, that what GISS had previously claimed as 4 nations' independent temperature graphs are not independent. All 4 national agencies around the world used the same base data and each then made separate adjustments. When I pointed out his accidental omission, he stopped corresponding. Do you realise that that base data has never been audited until an Australian scientist, John McLean, got hold of it? And he found 71 categories of errors. I haven't got time to go into the details. So I held NASA GISS head Gavin Schmidt accountable for NASA GISS fabricating Iceland temperature data records. Indeed, NASA GISS has created temperature data in places where temperature is not measured. NASA executive scientists and astronauts wrote a scathing letter to NASA's head, pleading with him to stop GIST from corrupting climate science. NASA's own people want them to stop corrupting science. NASA GIST has never presented scientific proof that human carbon dioxide needs to be cut. Never. How many times have we been told it has? Other agencies prominent in claiming or inferring that human carbon dioxide needs to be cut have never provided scientific proof. Never. All depend on taxpayer funding through governments. America's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the British Meteorological Office's Hadley Centre with its HADCRUT database, the basis for the UN climate report. The Australian Academy of Science, who I held accountable in writing. Ross Garnaut's 2008 Garnaut Review admits his influential report has no scientific proof. He starts it that way in Chapter 2. Despite his massive conflicts of interest, the Rudd government often used Garnaut's review to justify climate and energy policies. No university, no scientific society, no agency, no journal publisher, no government, no journalist, no NGO, not Greenpeace, WWF, Climate 200, no celebrity, no company, no industry group, no politician anywhere has provided scientific proof that we need to cut human carbon dioxide. The federal government energy agencies and departments currently crippling Australia's energy grid have never provided scientific proof. That's why they can't answer your questions, Ben, and you know that. Good on you for your work too. Never have any one of them provided scientific basis for policy. Yet this man's facing annihilation for his company and sending how many hundreds of jobs out of work? 500. Plus the 6-to-1 multiplier, which means 3,000 people across the state and the country that rely on his 500 employees. Makes me bloody angry. I conclude that some climate academics are really activists, misrepresenting climate science, while having substantial conflicts of interest, including being on government payrolls. In my view, these include Tim Flannery, Will Steffen, the late Will Steffen, David Caroli, Ove Goldberg, Leslie Hughes, Kurt Lambach, Matthew England, Andy Pittman, and Stefan Lewandowski. You're funding these people, or you were. Canadian climatologist Professor Tim Ball, with 40 years holding alarmists accountable around the world, said, "I am the only person, the only member of Parliament or Congress anywhere in the world to hold a government climate agency, the CSIRO, accountable." Mark Morano confirmed that. This is not said to brag. It shows that most Western politicians and governments have gullibly swallowed or ignorantly supported climate fraud. They do not hold these people accountable. Across parliaments, politicians, like many people, bow to groupthink, party dictates and peer pressure to meet an ever-present need to belong. Former senior American Senator James Inhofe was about to vote for a carbon dioxide emissions trading scheme in the US Congress as the basis for a global carbon dioxide tax when Morano showed him it's part of UN Agenda 21 to lock up land across America. Fact. At the last minute, Inhofe really got into it, stood up and said no, and he rallied the US Senate to oppose it. The American Senate rejected the scheme and the world was spared the UN's global carbon dioxide tax. One man stood up when he woke up. All the scary forecasts of climate catastrophes have failed. Polar ice caps, storms, Great Barrier Reef annihilated, polar bears, all bullshit. Yet here in Australia, the Greens, the Labor Party, the Liberals, the Teals, the Nationals say they rely on CSIRO, BOM, the UN, NASA GIST for climate and energy policies, including the UN's Paris Agreement and net zero. You are being fraudulently deceived. So what does nature tell us about climate variability? Analysis of our 24,000 data sets from worldwide show no process change, none of this, just natural inherent variation and natural cycles. The last 30 years of data from NASA satellites measuring atmospheric temperatures show no warming despite ever-increasing production of carbon dioxide from China, India, America, Russia, Europe, Brazil. No change in temperatures. Flat or virtually flat. The longest temperature trend during industrialisation is 40 years of cooling from the 1930s through to 1976. Cooling! Carbon dioxide is essential for all life on Earth and is classified as a trace gas because at 0.04% of Earth's atmosphere, there is bugger all of it. Nature controls the carbon dioxide level regardless of what we humans do, as major global recessions in 2009 and 2020 proved, and as shown in seasonal variation of temperature of atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. Nature controls it completely, doesn't matter what the hell we do. Even more basic, our atmosphere, Earth's atmosphere, cools the land and ocean surfaces through conduction, convection, latent heat of evaporation and condensation, and finally through radiation. The atmosphere does not and cannot warm our Earth. Think about it. It cannot. It cools. Natural drivers of climate variability include, all excluded from the UN, these include galactic, solar, planetary, Earth's surface topography, atmospheric, water vapour, oceanic, regional decadal cycles, biological, regional changes to vegetation, interactions. Climate and energy scammers prey on people's ignorance of variation to falsely portray natural variation as change. It's not. It's just natural. It's not climate change, it's natural variability. Alarmists are preying on people's ignorance of science. In many people, especially politicians, groupthink and peer pressure cripple reasoning, and they override care. Just sideline their care. Alarmists are preying on people's ignorance of science. In many people, especially politicians, groupthink, as I said, overrides care. There's no need to worry about climate. There's no need to worry about a warmer climate. Instead, worry about governance. CSIRO's fraudulent Gen Cost report, Ben, grossly understates the cost of changing to solar and wind, the most expensive forms of energy generation. CSIRO's fraud. It is fraud. Fraud is the deliberate presentation of something as it is not for personal gain. It's fraud. CSIRO's fraud in Gen Cost is based on flawed assumptions about sunk costs, interest or discount rates, generator life expectancies, estimates of cost to build, unspecified firming costs, unknown pumped hydro costs, which they do not reveal to us. All hidden. The Liberal Labor Uniparty failed to closely scrutinise CSIRO's Gen Cost report. I'll give one exception, Colin, Boyce. Solar and wind consume enormous resources and energy during manufacturing. That makes them inherently expensive. Eking, as they do, energy from low-density sources makes them even more expensive. You cannot have the energy density in solar and wind to be viable generators. Plus, solar and wind return humanity to dependence on the vagaries of weather when promoters claim future increased weather variability. This is insane. They're not suitable for an industrial economy such as aluminium smelting. Subsidies are essential and reduce national productivity and wealth, making solar and wind parasitic. They are parasitic on our economy. Solar and wind are reversing human progress. There is no scientific, no economic, no environmental, no social or moral case for solar and wind. Ben, the title of your talk was The Myth of Renewables. It's the fraud of renewables. But thank you for speaking up. Who's responsible? Almost the entire Parliament and the federal bureaucracy. They're getting away with it because people are dumbed down on science and have yet to feel the huge pain of higher electricity prices. Members of Parliament avoid data generally and are not scientifically literate. And on that is based the destruction of our economy, our country. The same people driving the lie about nature's trace atmospheric gas, essential to all life on Earth, are driving other governance failures. The COVID response across Western nations, homicide, the money and banks, the money system, the tax system, the anti-human scam, which I may discuss in more detail later. Every major problem is created in Canberra or worsened there. Every major problem. You can challenge me on that in Q&A. The core problem is that most politicians simply do not care and are ignorant, dishonest, fraudulent, stupid or gutless. Or maybe all of the above. Shoddy governance avoids or contradicts data. Instead, the Liberal Labor Uniparty uses emotion, fear, headlines, paybacks for donors and vested interests. They justify theft from the people and cede sovereignty. History shows government is prone to being a vehicle for transferring wealth. This is nothing new. How? Because our Constitution is armed to prevent this. I'll tell you how. Pamela Meyer, in her book, How to Spot a Liar, said, quote, "Lying is a cooperative act. Think about it. A lie has no power whatsoever by its mere utterance. Its power emerges when someone else agrees to believe the lie." That's the power of the lie. The people, we, the people, have abdicated. We, the people, unwittingly ceded our authority over to Parliament. This matters because it's the key to restoring a country. At the moment, we are working for the government. They are supposed to be serving the people. In Australian politics, love, care, reason and truth have been pushed aside for ego, betrayal and illogical contradiction of data. Reason has given way to subtle control, theft, aggression and suppression, and most people don't even know it. Western politicians are reversing 170 years of remarkable human progress. Our society, our Western civilisation is in decline. This is not just happening in Australia. It's orchestrated globally. Politicians across many Western parliaments have betrayed our species. So people need leadership that serves the people, based on solid data. Freedom for personal enterprise with a small central government, as Australia proved early last century, when we were number one in per capita income, the highest in the world. We're now heading for 20th. Instead, we now have less freedom than Eastern Europe, and we have less enterprise than China and Vietnam. We need to establish an Office of Scientific Integrity with public scrutiny of science on every policy claimed to be based on science. I'll wrap up by saying Australia needs real leadership from leaders who care and who want to do good, not just look good. Leaders with courage to make hard decisions and to communicate the benefits of those decisions in honest messaging that informs and excites people. The truth is very valuable, based on hard data. It starts with we the people. Since 2007, I've held MPs, departments, agencies, academics, corporations and others accountable on climate. Why? Because I detest politicians killing our country and stifling our people. That's what they're doing. We need to curtail politicians and we need to release the people, freeing people to use our inherent personal enterprise. We all want to restore our country. So I commend Rethink Renewables for your initiative and leadership. The one thing I want everyone to remember is there is no scientific proof for the climate and energy narratives and policies, none. And there is no scientific basis for policy, none. This matters because we value and care for our precious natural environment and we love and admire humans and our human environment. Instead of ego, betrayal and illogical contradiction of scientific data, we need to change the governance and political system to restore love, care and reason and restore truth. To tap into human potential, to restore human progress and abundance. That's our challenge, restoring love, care and reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. I think he deserves another round of applause. And I wish every man, woman and child in Australia could listen to that speech because I think that was incredible information and that's the sort of stuff everyday Australians need to know about. So thank you, Senator Roberts. Now, we have Nick Jorss here today. He's not announced, but I think it's important to get a few comments from him because he's tackling a lot of this stuff head on. So please welcome Nick Jorss from Coal Australia.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for hosting today. Fantastic event. I am unannounced, and I'm really a late addition, so I'll try and keep it fairly brief. I'm actually down here for my kids' basketball tournament, which was 5 games over the weekend and just finished earlier. I want to talk a little bit more about, I'm going to start with the coal industry, where we are today, but I also want to talk about how we got here and where we can go from here. So, my journey, I'm a lapsed civil engineer, and then a lapsed investment banker. You'll start to detect a bit of a trend here. Attention span of about 8 or 9 years. And then I started a business. I got into business, started a business called Stanmore Coal with a couple of mates of mine. We started it on my kitchen table, living in Sydney at the time, and we didn't know what we didn't know, but we got some good advice from friends like Jeremy Barlow, and we grew that business. So over 10 years, I ran that business, and it ended up being a screaming success. Not without its kind of challenges along the way. I think when we listed at 20 cents. The first day we went to 40 cents. I was in the newspaper because I, in theory, made a lot of money. Went all the way to $1.50 before we did anything, and then back down to 4 cents as the coal price collapsed through to 2015. Then we bought an asset for $1, and that turned it all around, and we got the timing right. And that Stanmore is now a big company. It's a couple of $1 billion company. I got out in 2016. I thought that was pretty easy, so I'll do it again. So I got involved in a little junior called Bowen, Coke and Colin. We went and bought quite a bunch of assets. We acquired Bluff, we acquired Burton Mine, and that was all looking okay. And then on, I think the 1st of July 2022, the former Labor government, Cameron Dick, Treasurer, announced the world's highest royalty regime. So he imposed that without consultation, without warning, and it went from what used to be back in the day sort of 7% royalties, and it went to 7 to 10, then we had a 15, and he announced it was going to be introduced a 20% rate, a 30% rate, and a 40% rate of your revenue, not of your profit. So what's happened out of that now is that in the last 6 months, I can say from their accounts, none of the big coal miners in Queensland are now making money. So BMA, BHP, Mitsubishi lost $1 million a day in the last 6 months. I mean, these businesses are not charities. They're not going to stick around and continue the employment. There's 30,000 direct jobs. There's 235,000 indirect jobs, and prosperity throughout the state and the nation that filters down to here. Without our coal industry, it's our biggest export industry in Queensland. We don't have this prosperity. But the list goes on. Stanmore, the company I founded, made a loss of $50 million and paid $94 million in state royalties. Coronado, Peabody, my own company, Anglo Coal. So at least half, and probably almost all, because many of them don't disclose, of the met coal miners that produce the coal that makes the steel that we build things out of in Queensland are currently losing significant amounts of money, and they're still paying billions of dollars in royalties. So the system's broken. The industry is not looking for a handout, it's looking for a reasonable level of tax where we don't tax it out of existence. And in my own case, Bowen Coking Coal, we started at the wrong time. We started pretty much just as that new royalty rates were announced. We've paid $120 million in royalties, state royalties, before we've made our first profit, and now we're in administration and receivership. So we didn't survive, unfortunately. 500 jobs already, about 300 of those are gone. There's some still there. We'll see what happens. So that's the tragedy of it. But I'm kind of interested in how did we get here, and I think it's reasonable. People might assume today that the coal industry's just lost its social licence because we've moved on and that was an old technology, and now we kind of we're looking at better and brighter things, solar, wind, whatever. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. And I'll have a bit more to say about this publicly, but in 2011 there was a engineering graduate from QUT called John Hepburn. That's where the similarities with me stop. He did about 10 years in Greenpeace, and in 2011 he wrote a paper with a couple of other guys called Stopping the Australian Coal Export Boom. And you can still find it on the dark reaches of the internet. And I've just put in a major submission into the Integrity Senate inquiry, misinformation, disinformation, astroturfing on this very topic. And a number of other people have put in the same thing. But this paper outlined very specifically in forensic detail how they were going to destroy the social licence of coal. They were going to infiltrate existing organisations, environmental conservation organisations. So that was, that's proved to be the case. They've been very successful. So they put money now into Queensland Conservation Council, Australian Conservation Foundation, Mackay Conservation, Whitsundays, all of these up and down the coast, they fund them. How much do they fund them? Well, in 2023, they brought in $129 million. $129 million of foreign offshore money, mainly. A lot of it from tech billionaires who've made their money and are now trying to buy indulgences or, fit through the eye of a needle to get into heaven. And they spend this money primarily in Australia, supporting these existing groups. And the deal is, and we know this because people have been involved around it, like Steve Nowakowski and others, like Coalition for Conservation, is that if you support the narrative, if you're Queensland Conservation Council and you come out and you only talk about climate and you oppose any form of reliable low-cost electricity, call it coal, call it gas, call it nuclear, then you get funding. If you come out and you support any of those things, or you start to question the narrative and you say, well, hang on, how come we're carving up literally hundreds of thousands of hectares of koala, sugar glider habitat in central Queensland, North Queensland, Steve Nowakowski has pointed out, or we're ripping up food bowls in Victoria for transmission lines and wind towers. If you do that, well, your funding gets cut off, and we know that because we know people who've had their funding cut off. So this sort of lapse in social licence around the coal industry, it doesn't just apply to the coal industry, it also applies to gas, it applies to nuclear, basically every form of baseload which provides us low cost and reliable electricity. And it's been a very deliberate campaign and deliberate strategy, and it's been incredibly successful. Well, how successful has it been? Well, if you look at Australia's coal production in 2011 when they wrote the paper, it's basically pretty much similar today. It's grown a little bit. What's happened to Indonesia? It's gone from 350 million tonnes to 850 million tonnes. So what have we done? We've outsourced emissions, we've outsourced jobs, and we've outsourced prosperity. They looked to stop a growth of about 300 million tonnes in the Australian coal industry. They succeeded. What would that create? It would create another 30,000 direct jobs, another 250-odd thousand indirect jobs. It would create another $90 billion worth of income into this country, taxes, royalties, hospitals, schools, all the things that we rely upon. They stopped it very successfully, but they didn't stop coal demand. Coal demand continues to go up. So, this year again we're at record coal demand, 8.8 billion tonnes across the globe. What they did stop is they stopped our prosperity in Australia. So it's a massive own goal, And this guy that wrote this thing, ironically, is the son of a coal miner from Rockhampton. So that's how we got here, and it's not by accident. And it affects everybody. So it affects now our electricity price. So I think, as Ben or maybe Malcolm said, we now have the highest electricity prices in Asia. So we export our coal and our gas to all the Asian countries, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, India, China. They produce low-cost electricity with it. In the case of China, they also produce expensive intermittent renewables, which they ship back to us. We plug into our system, and that drives up our whole of system costs and drives up our electricity bills. So a massive own goal. I don't want to. So one of the things I put in my submission was that what we need is truth, truth and facts and evidence. I'm a civil engineer, so I'm a sucker for truth. And all the marketing and political guys say, you can't win the debate on facts. You've got to win it on emotion. But I think it's got to be grounded in facts and grounded in truth. That's what we do. We tell the truth. That's inherently what we do. So now you have Queensland Conservation Council coming out against Bowen Coking Coal's expansion, New Lenton, and saying this is a climate catastrophe. They're saying that this is going to cause extreme weather, an increased extreme weather in Queensland, Australia. You've got the Australian Conservation Foundation on the playbook I just described coming out and saying Winchester South, which is Whitehaven's big new project that they're looking to develop, which I'd have to say they'll never develop unless the royalties are reduced, because nobody's investing in Queensland anymore in the mining space. BHP's said they're not putting another dollar in, they're going to shut mines. People are going to start shutting mines. But back to Winchester South, it's going to release 583 million tonnes of carbon dioxide over its lifetime, 30 or 40 years. Sounds like a big number. They call that a climate bomb, and they say, well, this is going to affect the weather. It's going to impact extreme weather. But if you actually take their own modelling, I'm going to depart slightly from what Malcolm talked about here. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say, well, let's just hoist them on their own petard. So there's a model called Magic with a double C. You can Google it. It comes out of Melbourne, and and it's another great Australian export. They use this to underpin all the IPCC modelling on temperature. And if you plug it in, effectively where it comes out to is 0.5 degree of warming per trillion tonnes of carbon dioxide. So where does the Winchester South come out with their 583 million tonnes of warming? It comes out at 0.0001 of a degree. So this climate bomb that's going to, and I'm going to accept the science with a capital S at the moment, that's going to impact our weather, create extreme weather, more cyclones, all the rest of it, is going to, on their own numbers, is going to cause 0.0001 of a degree of warming. Now, I think you'd get more warming out of a Vindaloo, to be honest. My own project, New Lenton, that's add another 0. So 4 zeros and then a 1. That's the warming of that climate bomb that's going to create. So they've moved from science to pseudoscience to just no science at all. But I think they've become fat and lazy. I really think they've sort of lost the plot. They haven't been held to account. I mean, Malcolm's been doing a great job. A number of people have done a great job, but they haven't had an organised opposition, resistance. Everyone's just fallen in line. Coal Australia, I started with a bunch of my peers in the coal industry because I got sick of copying the crap, and it was the royalties that really prompted it. This is where it ends. If you say, well, what happens if you don't stand up? What happens if you're not that one person that stands up and say, well, I'm sorry, I'm sick of this. We can't drive our country in this direction. Well, this is where you get to. This is where it ends. It ends with our most productive, prosperous industry in Queensland being taxed out of existence. And that impacts everybody. From there, I think the critical thing is, well, where do we go from here? Coal Australia is a big organisation. Just in the Senate submission now, the Queensland Conservation Council is accused it of being an astroturf organisation. I don't know if you know what that is, but astroturf is fake grass, so that's what they call it for fake. If it's a fake grassroots organisation, well, Coal Australia has 100,000 supporters signed up. So it is about as grassroots as they come. It represents the coal industries, the coal communities, and the entire coal industry. They had a couple of other factoids in their submission, one of which was that coal demand is reducing. Well, it's quite ironic to me that in a submission to a Senate inquiry on misinformation and disinformation, their first fact was fundamentally wrong. Coal demand is increasing, and they didn't bother to do a very quick Google check to check whether that fact was correct or not. There's a whole another ball of wax around that, which we'll go through another time. But so what do? Well, we get mad or we get even, and I think I'm kind of more in the latter case. What we need is coordinated, organised opposition. There's a whole bunch of volunteer organisations doing great work like this one, but I think we need to do more. Right? We need to copy the playbook of Sunrise and these guys. So that paper in 2011 became the Sunrise Project, well funded. Money distributed throughout all these things. You recognise them, Farmers for Climate, Doctors for the Environment. All of these organisations have stood up as grassroots. They're astroturfs, and funded by these things. Get Up, the Australian Conservation Foundation, etc. So I'm interested in kind of levelling the playing field, bringing the facts back into the debate and having a serious conversation. So happy to have a bit more chat about that, but that's my next job. Thank you.
So just want to give you a little bit of a quick spiel about Let's Rethink Renewables and what we're trying to do. We actually have this artwork already paid for and designed. All we need people is to, I guess, either buy this artwork and put it up on, a billboard in your town, or print up some stickers and hand them out, or whatever you want to do with this artwork. It's completely free. All we need you to do is actually pay for the printing and the putting it up on the billboard. So you can head to the website and you can contact us if you're interested in doing that. It's a big part of what we're about. And I want to let you know some of the reasons as to why. So this is a map of the renewable energy zones in New South Wales. So these renewable energy zones are happening around the country. They're in Victoria, there's big projects here in Queensland, but specifically here in New South Wales, there's 5 renewable energy zones. This one here, where you can see in Dubbo, that's the Central West Arana Renewable Energy Zone. That's 20,000 square kilometres of what the Energy Co website says is the equivalent of a modern day power station. 20,000 square kilometres. There's countries that are smaller than that. So this is the sort of stuff that we're pushing back against. Now, this diagram here is representing offshore wind. Now, the one at the top is the Illawarra project. That was over 1,000 square kilometres. This is directly off the government's own website, by the way. And the one down the bottom in Gippsland, that's 15,000 square kilometres of offshore wind turbines. Massive stuff that has never been done before. They do have offshore wind projects, but they don't have the floating turbines like this one here. The only place in the world that has it is in America, and their projects are about 20 turbines. These are hundreds of turbines, and this is another reason why these projects are falling over, but we need to be pushing back against this sort of stuff. So this document here, this was put out in 2022 by the Victorian government, and this document was advocating for offshore wind and why we need offshore wind. And one of the arguments that they were making is that if Victoria wants to get to net zero based on onshore wind and solar alone, they would need 70% of Victoria's agricultural land to get there. And that's what this map shows. It says it directly in their document. What would Victoria do with 70% of its agricultural land gone with wind and solar, and we can't produce food there anymore? What would happen to our food supply? These are the big questions that we need to start asking our politicians, because this is what's coming. So I want to play this clip. This is Sophie Scamps, who's the federal member for McCallum, which is in the Northern Beaches, which is where I'm from. This is the sort of stuff she puts on her Instagram. So this is her dancing across a beach in McCallum, and it says, if we only lived in a country with ample sunshine and wind to become a leading renewable energy superpower. Well, what you don't notice in this video is where's the wind turbines off the coast of McCallum? And where are the solar panels? They just want all these projects, not in their electorates, somewhere else, in rural communities, out of sight, out of mind. And this is a screen grab from Zali Steggall's website, the federal member for Borumba, which is where I live, just south of McCallum. And she's actually deleted this off her website, but she did have it up there for a long time. And it says, I do not support wind farms along Warringah's beachfront. So she's happy to go and advocate for these policies in Parliament, but she doesn't want them in her electorate. And she goes on to say, it is unfortunate that such an important issue as the climate crisis is trivialised by some and reduced to my personal use of solar panels, the car that I drive, and a joke petition to put windmills on Manly Beach. So it might be a joke for Zali, but it's not a joke for people living in rural and regional communities, because they're the ones that are having to face this sort of stuff. So again, Please support everything that we're doing. This is some examples of some of the work that we can do. If we do get some people to contribute to the banners and everything that we're doing. So we've got these core flutes here, stickers up the top, and also this is one of the billboards that they put up on a shipping container, and they put it on someone's property near the highway so everyone can see what we're about. And this is the big kahuna here. So if anyone wants to see this one on the road and maybe drive it through McCallum or drive it through Warringah, this is the sort of stuff we need to do, I think. So please get on board with everything that we're doing. You can head to our website, Let's Rethink Renewables.org, and sign up. And if you do want to donate to us directly, as I said, please contact us or see Cooper up the back. Moving on, we're going to be hearing from Colin Boyce now, the federal member for Flynn. He's another member of Parliament that is representing one of these huge electorates that's having to face this sort of stuff. And this is one of the big problems. People in rural and regional communities, they can elect good men like Colin to represent them, but when they go into Parliament, the Parliament has a horde of MPs from city areas. So we need to really bring this argument to the cities and drive this home to city people so they can understand what's happening. But for now, let's hear from the man himself, Colin Boyce.
Thank you. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Colin Boyce, obviously. I've lived in central Queensland pretty much all my time. An accidental politician, but be that as it may, here I am. Today I would just like to try and arm you with some questions that you should be putting to your political representatives, regardless of what political flavour they come from. I'm not here to peddle politics or apportion blame or point fingers, merely to try and point out some issues that we are facing as Australians, and they are really important ones. This whole push to decarbonise Australian industry, to have 82% renewable energy by 2030, 43% carbon emissions by 2030. The government will come out in the coming weeks and revise that emissions target to 2035, and there's varying opinions on what they will say. Some people are expecting something like 75% or in the vicinity of that, and indeed net zero by 2050. For me, the big question is, what is it going to cost in terms of economics, in terms of people's prosperity, their lifestyles, their jobs, etc. And that is the important question that you need to be asking whoever it is that you speak to. You need to be talking to your friends, your children, your neighbours, and putting these questions to them to see if they can answer it, or more to the point, even if they actually realise it. Now, I represent the federal seat of Flynn, which is twice as big as Tasmania. It's central Queensland pretty much, from Bundaberg to Rockhampton all the way out to Emerald, as far north as the outskirts of Claremont, down across the Great Dividing Range, Wondai, Proston, all of those places in between. That electorate covers a great deal of the central Queensland coalfields, also the mining and resource sector in terms of gas, also a huge agricultural sector that produces absolutely anything you can think of. Gladstone, which is the capital of the electorate, if you like. Port of Gladstone is the largest multi-commodity shipping port in Australia. We have the largest fleet of tugboats of any port in Australia, second only to Port Hedland, where the iron ore goes out. Obviously, there's the CSG gas industry there, the largest liquefied natural gas facility on the east coast of Australia. Rio Tinto's alumina sector there, 2 refineries and 1 smelter. Australia Cement is there, the largest cement kiln in Australia. We've got 3 coal-fired power stations. We provide baseload power to the greater Queensland and indeed the the southern states as well. So we are one of the big economic engine rooms of Australia. We also have 94 of these renewable energy projects that I'm dealing with at the moment, and they're the ones that I know about. And it's hardly a week goes by where we don't find another one or become aware of another one. I'm doing a lot of work in that space to try and expose the impact of these things and what they're going to have, particularly on the big wilderness areas of the Great Dividing Range. The last big stands of remnant vegetation are being bulldozed as we speak. So last week I did a chopper tour up through central Queensland with a guy called Stephen Kowalski, who you're probably aware of. He's put together a slideshow presentation. We are doing a lot of work with videos and so forth, but we haven't got that far yet because it only happened a couple of days ago. And so I'm just going to show you a slideshow that he's put, and I'll make some comments as we go. But you'll have to forgive me because I haven't even seen it myself yet, other than seeing it when we did it. But so that's a wind turbine. That's a single wind turbine out on its own at Clark Creek up northwest of Rockhampton. And we're yet to determine why that has been put there. It's literally out on its own in the middle of nowhere. But that's the sort of thing that we're looking at. That is Clark Creek as we speak now, and that is only stage one. And I did this same chopper tour about a year ago, and we have all of the footage of what it used to look like versus what it looks like now. That's it from a different angle, and as you can see, once upon a time that was all untouched range wilderness, and now there are 60-metre haul roads everywhere you can possibly imagine. That's an excavator. That's how they start clearing the haul roads. That is all koala habitat, the whole lot of that, greater glider, everything you can think of. If the metropolitan people knew exactly what was happening to the koala bears up there, there would be absolute outrage. I'm a farmer, I'm a grazier, I was an earth moving contractor for many, many years. If I got my D9s up there and started pulling down that scrub, they would put me in jail, full stop. This is the sort of thing that happens in terms of the regulation that does not even take into account any erosion controls or anything. It's just dirt pushed over the sides of the hills everywhere, and it's obviously going to end up in all of the creeks and waterways all the way out to the Great Barrier Reef. So reef legislation, as you know, which is a piece of legislation passed in Queensland Parliament pre-20, back when I was there, I crossed the floor on the bill and upset everybody, if you remember that. Anyway, all of these projects aren't subject to reef legislation. They are non-compliant with any of it. That's a bulldozer pushing up dirt. That's how they do it. And as you can see there, they just push it anywhere they feel like it. Yeah, that's where they're making gravel for the concrete and so forth for these wind turbines. As you can see, yeah, huge impact. They tell you that they don't blast anything. Well, there's a drill rig drilling holes so that they can blast out the rock there where they're going to build a wind turbine. Again, another picture. That's the Great Dividing Range. That's actually looking south. Yeah, and all of that's going to become wind turbines. So that's a pad where they're going to put a wind turbine. There's something like between 600 and 800 metres of concrete goes into the base of one of those big wind turbine towers. There are literally machines working everywhere, hundreds of them. And as you can see in the wider distance there across the ranges, that's all going to be wind turbines. And this is basically what they do. The haul roads are about 60 metres wide. so that they can get all of their big machinery up there, the big cranes, the wind turbine blades and components. As you can see, that's on top of literally a granite cliff face. And you can see where they blasted out all the rock there. Again, push all the scrub up, leave it, forget it. There's no sediment control, nothing. See the big banks of dirt there? That's what happens. So that's happening right now as we speak. And you'll be very happy to know that this project, that's Lotus Creek, this one, that was actually sold to the Queensland government in the term of the last Parliament to the tune of, well, we know it's a $1.3 billion project. So the Queensland taxpayers actually own that. All you people are part of that. It's all your fault. So aren't we lucky? But anyway, as you can see from these pictures, the impact is absolutely enormous. That is just one project. Lotus Creek, 46 turbines. We've identified well over 3,000 of them are going to happen in my electorate. There are over 30,000 of them that we've actually mapped all the way from Cairns to Melbourne across the greater Australian continent. That's the onshore ones. The problem for me is that most people aren't even aware of this sort of thing. You don't see it. The media won't report it. I invited several media identities and personalities to come on this trip with us so that they could actually see it themselves. All refused, including the Queensland Conservation Council, which we don't hear a thing from, nor do we hear from the Environmental Defender's Office. All of these people are basically third-party cheer squads for this whole renewable sector that is eminent. Yeah, it's quite confronting when you see it all, and to see it all in real life is just, it's staggering, it really is. All right, that's that one out of the road. I wasn't very sure what I was going to, what I was going to get presented with there, but for you, as the wider public, you need to be aware of this stuff and understand the impact that it is going to have. As I said, we're dealing with 94 projects, and the problem with most of the projects there is whilst many of them have their environmental approvals of one sort or another, or are seeking environmental approvals, most of them do not have financial closure from the investors that are putting up the money to build them. Now, the proponents are arguing with their investors that this is a necessity. They're negotiating with the government, and that is why they've invented this piece of legislation called the Capacity Investment Scheme. Now, just show of hands, who's heard of the Capacity Investment Scheme? A few people have, most people haven't. Most people wouldn't have a clue what it is. So in a nutshell, it is basically a piece of legislation that will underwrite the minimum profitability of these projects, which the Australian taxpayer will fund. And it is designed like that so that the investors will make the commitment to build the projects. Because at the moment, what the investors are saying to the proponents, you cannot guarantee us a return, so why should we invest the money? And make no mistake, this is all about making money. Now, the argument I use is the $1 billion argument, and there's plenty of projects that are worth a lot more than $1 billion. But if you were going to invest $1 billion and you want a 10% return, right, that's pretty standard business practice these days. 10% of $1 billion is $100 million a year. Right? That's every year for the lifetime of the project. So how do the proponents and the government guarantee that they're going to make $100 billion? And the simple fact of the matter is they can't. And the reason that they can't is because the weather is variable. Sometimes the wind blows if it's wind turbines. Sometimes the sun shines if it's solar panels. Sometimes it doesn't. So because the weather is variable, their electrical generation capacity is therefore variable. Now, when they do their offtake agreements to people like Rio Tinto, the alumina sector in Gladstone, Rio Tinto is not going to pay them on what they think they're going to generate. They're only going to pay them for the electrons that come out the end of the transmission line. So again, yeah, sure, we'll sign up to whatever energy you can produce, but that will be gauged on what comes out the end, not what you think will come out the end. So that is why the capacity investment scheme has been invented to underwrite and guarantee these projects so that these investors will put the money up and the proponents will go ahead and build these projects. Ultimately, the taxpayer will be the one who will foot the bill. Now, for anybody who's interested, I can give you a brief on it, which I had done for me, and it's quite comprehensive. And one of the questions that I asked when I had the brief written was, how much is the capacity investment scheme going to cost the Australian taxpayer? And indeed, what are the forecast estimates in forward estimates in the budget papers and so forth? So, and I will quote from this document, the government's maximum liability, i.e. the expected cost of the capacity investment scheme, and an estimated payments under the capacity investment scheme are classified in the budget as not for publication due to commercial sensitivities. So the point to that is that commercial in confidence agreements between the Australian government and the proponents coupled with the investors, they're not going to tell you about it. So you don't really know what it's going to cost you, which I think is quite appalling. Anyway, it's something that you need to ask whoever it is that you speak to, both state and federal representatives, your community leaders and so forth. How much will this actually cost? And that's the big question that nobody wants to answer. What is the total system cost of 82% renewable energy by 2030? Now, most people aren't aware of total system cost. Time and time again, we see Mr. Bowen stand up in Parliament and he will tell you repeatedly that renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy. I listen to it every time I go to Parliament. I'm not allowed to throw things. I would if I, but anyway, that's by the by. What Mr. Bowen quotes is wholesale generation cost. He does not take into account retail cost for the consumer. So retail cost includes all of the transmission towers, the substations, the synchronisers, all of those pieces of infrastructure that have to be built to hook up these wind turbines and solar panels and batteries and so forth that are getting built. And if you take that cost into account, it is, well, there's varying arguments, but Princeton University, Melbourne University came up with a figure of about $1.5 to $1.7 trillion by 2030. And those estimates are now being reviewed because it's all cost blowout on everything, as you can imagine. So the point to that is that this idea that it is cheap is nonsense. Have a look at your own electricity bill. I don't know what they're like down here in the Gold Coast or Greater Gold Coast area, but up where I come from in central Queensland, if you get an itemised bill from a small business, 30% of that bill will be generation cost. 70% of the bill is network charges. Right? So the more and more that we the more and more wind turbines and solar panels that come online with transmission lines, synchronisers, substations, network charges, network distribution systems, all of these things, that will all go on everybody's electricity bill as network charges. And that is why most people in Australia's electricity bill has gone up $1,000 in the last 3 years. That's what's happened. In spite of the fact that the Prime Minister, with the Treasurer and the Energy Minister and so forth, promised everybody repeatedly that you would have a $275 reduction in your electricity bill. And it's nonsense. It's just not going to happen. So how does that affect business and industry? So another piece of legislation that the government has put forward is a thing called the safeguard mechanism. So who knows about the safeguard mechanism? So again, the safeguard mechanism is a lovely way of saying carbon tax. So that piece of legislation went through Parliament a few years ago, and in a nutshell, 215 of the biggest emitters, company emitters of carbon dioxide in Australia will have to reduce their emissions by 4.6% every year to meet the government's 43% emissions target. So 30% of those companies are where I live, in central Queensland. All the coal mines, all of the big engineering companies, the gas, the alumina, all of those. This paper here, written by the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, who want to decarbonise diesel-using industries, is proposing that they lower the threshold on the safeguard mechanism from emitters of 100,000 tonnes per year down to 25,000 tonnes a year. Now, if they do that, if the government does that, that will include thousands of more businesses who will now be subject to having to decarbonise their business, whatever it happens to be, and at the end of the day, that is a net cost, and they pass that cost on. And of course, what happens to the consumer? You have to pay more for absolutely everything that gets produced. Again, this paper about taking away the diesel fuel rebate scheme on agriculture, the mining, fisheries and mining and forestries and transport sectors. It is a proposal that will increase the cost of diesel exponentially for all of those businesses and industries that use it. Again, I would argue if they're going to do that, to argue the whole pious and virtuous idea of decarbonisation, all they're doing is fuelling the whole cost of living issue, because whether we like it or not, if you take away that rebate from the transport industry, for an example, every single thing we consume comes on the back of a truck. And every truck company will pass that cost on to the retail businesses that you operate through, and a jar of Vegemite will become more expensive. Fuel at the petrol station will become more expensive. Everything will become more expensive. So some of these issues you need to do some research. I'll make these available to anybody who wants them. You can read them for yourselves. It's a scary future, is the way I'm seeing things. What we are doing is exporting our industrial capability offshore to overseas countries in the pious and virtuous idea that we're going to somehow decarbonise industry in Australia and somehow change the climate on planet Earth. And it's just nonsense. And unfortunately, there are too many Australians who, for one reason or another, are so busy walking behind the plough of life that they just don't understand this stuff, don't want to understand this stuff, and don't really understand the ramifications of it. So I'll leave it there. Hopefully you'll ask me some questions. I can talk all day about this stuff, but we are on time limit, so thank you for having me, and well done.
Thank you, Colin. Boyce. Please, another round of applause for Colin Boyce. And those images that he had up there were really horrific. I mean, as we've been saying all the way through this today, if the city people saw what's happening out in these communities, there'd be uproar, but it's just not happening. So that's what we're trying to push forward. And speaking of Let's Rethink Renewables, we've had a little bit of a change in the last month or so. We've got a new president, and really she's been the driving force behind this movement for a very long time now. It's only fitting that she's the president of Let's Rethink Renewables. Her name is Katy McCallum. She's a real warrior, and I'm going to find out about that now. So please welcome Katy McCallum.
G'day everybody, I'm Katy McCallum. I come from a little place called Kilkheven. Does anybody know where Kilkheven is? Oh wow, well I know you've been there, I've taken you to the pub. A couple times maybe. So Kilkheven, it's your backyard. I'm not sure that many people down here in the southeast corner understand that what happens out in your backyard affects what goes on down here. And back in 2021, December 2021, we all of a sudden had this massive shitstorm dumped on us in Kilkheven by a Queensland government-owned corporation called Powerlink. Now, Glenda knows all about it because she lives nearby me over the mountains in the next valley. None of us had any idea about any of this stuff. And back then, I'll be honest and tell you, I didn't know anything about the ISP or AEMO or what was happening with coal royalties. We were just living our lives, making ends meet, sending the kids to school. I own the local shop in the main street in Kilkheven. The first I knew about it was an extremely upset resident who walked in to say, did you know that this is going on? Now, I'd been in the coppers for years. I'd done over 16 years as a general duties cop before we bought the shop. So I'm the local person that everybody keeps coming into to ask to fix problems. So the whole town was like, Katy, what are we going to do about this? When I looked into it and I understood what was going on, I was absolutely horrified about the powers that the Queensland government has and all the other state governments around Australia to come in and acquire your land back, whether it's a corridor, whether it's the entire property. And as a result of looking into all that and all of my, I guess, experience I'd had with legislation, I'd only ever looked into criminal legislation. I'd locked people up for being drunk in the street or fighting in a pub. I didn't understand the powers that our government has. So Kilkheven Action Group kicked off, and as a result of that, it took me all sorts of places. It took me to the front doorsteps of Parliament House in Canberra, trying to fight this and trying to get the message out there. And that's eventually evolved into what you see here today, Let's Rethink Renewables. And we're trying to get the message out to the entire nation as to what is going on in your backyard, the place where your food, your fibre and your minerals all come from. All of the things that every single person in the nation needs to survive. Now, I'm not an expert on all the stuff that these guys are experts on, and that's why I love being surrounded by them, because they know their stuff. But I'm the reality, I'm the face of what's happening out in these country towns, and I get to see it all the time. So I'm going to show you a project that's just outside of my town at the moment. It's absolutely tearing us up. They're about to extend it. It's called the Woolooga Solar Farm. And my amazing son down the back there, Cooper, took his drone out the other day and captured some more footage for me. I'm going to stand off to the side so you can all see it properly. It's about 1,500 acres of what used to be cattle grazing land. It was pretty much covered all over with trees, much like up the back there, full of koalas, full of greater gliders. And I know that there's people here today who've seen it personally, driven past it. That's all going to extend right over to that other bit over there. Now, I live over the back of that mountain up there on 900 acres, up between Rattans National Park and Oakview National Park. My family, we all live up there. And the other day we had a big earthquake about 1,000 metres from our back door. So this is the area where they proposed to put the pumped hydro that Borumba that Glenda told everybody about today. So Earthquake Alley it is now. We've been told that there's possibly more coming, but they're going to construct possibly the world's biggest pumped hydro scheme up there on that mountain range. And the reason why they're going to put it there and the reason why they're putting all this here is it's all connected. I call it the big triangle. So they wanted to put wind turbines over on the Coolor coast that just got canned last week. Did everybody hear about forest wind? That was cancelled. The issue we have with that is they may have cancelled the current proposal, but they haven't repealed the legislation yet. And the company has said that they're still going to push forward with trying to put it in. So for Borumba to go ahead, it requires my district to be coded in panels, because it requires twice as much electricity each day to pump the water up the mountain than what it's going to produce when they drop it back down. And they need to connect it all with giant HV lines that they want to run through my area, which is home of the greater glider, the wedge-tailed eagle, koalas galore, these little cute things called phascogales. There is that much wildlife up there that no one knows about living on private properties because it's not national parks. It's never been counted. So what's the government done? They've come in and they have just bullied landowners. Bullied us. It's quite atrocious, actually. There's one man there who is an engineer out at Emerald. They knew that they were going to destroy his entire property, so they chartered a plane, Powerlink chartered a plane, flew out to his property, out to his office in Emerald, so he had no choice but to speak to them. This was the end of last year. Knocked on his office door, walked in and said, well, you've got to talk to us now because we're here in front of you. Here's the paperwork. We just want to let you know that your property is going to be sacrificed to the HV lines. We'll give you a token amount to cover the value of the land, and then we'll work out something for the improvements for your house, but you're stuffed. You're gone. You've got no home. We're taking it off you. We're going to cut the block down the middle, and we're going to give one half to one neighbour to keep him happy, and we're going to give one half to the other neighbour to keep them happy. But you can just go find somewhere else to live with the money we give you. This man already had his property taken off him in South Africa a few years before. That's how he ended up here in Australia. So that's what we're looking at down the barrel of. That's the that's the current battery energy storage system that they're putting in right now, and they have just gotten approval to extend the, hang on, let me keep going, to extend the panels. So that's where all the panels are now. This over here will all be panels soon, and that other half is down here. That'll all be panels eventually as well. And Murray Watt, the legend, this is what he had to say about it when he pushed through the approval just recently. But he wanted everybody to know that it's okay. This is an amazing example of primary industries and renewable energy industries working together because there's sheep grazing under the panels. Well, I drive past these panels twice, sometimes 4 times a day. The only thing grazing under these panels are weeds and big John Deere tractors with tanks of glyphosate on the back spraying the weeds. And there's rat's tail everywhere all around it. So let's listen to Murray.
Just approved a new solar farm in Queensland, and it only took 17 days to get this approval. This new solar farm, which will be just outside Beattie in Queensland, will provide enough power to supply 40,000 homes with their power needs. Of course, it's really good for the environment as well, because it's going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 208,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide every year. That's the equivalent of taking 75,000 cars off the road every single year. And did I mention it only took 17 days to get that approval done? The reason we were able to do that is it's going on predominantly cleared agricultural land.
That's not true.
It's going to be able to be used for agricultural purposes as well, including sheep grazing. So this is a win-win for our farmers and for renewable power and all of those who want to use renewable power in their home. All up since 2022, the Albanese government has approved around 90 new renewable energy projects. And that shows that we're serious about making sure that Australia becomes that renewable energy superpower that we all want to see it become, while of course bringing down emissions and creating jobs and reducing power prices. We're getting on with the job with even more renewable energy coming your way soon.
Well, when more renewable energy comes our way, I can tell you this, there'll be no beef at the grocery stores anymore. So my little shop in the main street of Kilkeven, every single day there are that many cattle trucks that used to come past. Isn't that right, husband, down the back, didn't we? Yeah, because we had the service station in town as well. Cattle truck after cattle truck after cattle truck. They're taking the cattle to market so that people down here have beef. Well, I reckon I'm lucky to see one every second day now. It's the Wide Bay Highway. It's the gateway to Queensland. So if you leave the Sunshine Coast, north of here, and you want to go into central Queensland, you have to come past my tiny little rickety shop. And it makes good coffee, just so you know, doesn't it? Yeah, these people here have had one. There is no cattle trucks coming past anymore. There's bugger all. And I'll tell you why. Because that solar farm, it's not a farm, but that's what they call it, that I showed you before, for every single one of those that are being bought up by big global companies, that's several hundred head of cattle that are not entering the market anymore. So have you have a thought about why your beef is so expensive? How much is a packet of mince at Coles these days? I don't know, I don't buy it anymore. I go to the local butcher and get grass-fed off the local properties. It is going to get to the point where the Aussie family that goes for their mainstay lasagna on a Sunday night will not be able to buy beef mince anymore to cook a decent feed for their kids because of this stuff. So that's the reality, and that's what I want to get the message out to everybody about. The reality out there in your backyard, which is my backyard. I am one of the landowners. We own 900 acres. We bought it to protect it. It's full of every endangered species you could possibly think of. Koala Australia and every group's trying to get their hands on us to try to help us protect it, but we're protecting it anyway, aren't we? There's all these properties out there, people like us living on them, and we are battling this every single day. The toll is huge. The toll it's taking on people, the financial cost, the mental cost. I get to see it. I've seen grown men crying in the last couple of years, and I thought I'd seen everything as a copper. But to see a grown man walk in and cry because of this is just disgusting. This is what our government is doing. And they're doing it to the people who are growing your food, who are growing your fibre, and are digging the minerals out of the ground, like Nick was talking about before, that allow everybody to live. So I just need everybody to please leave here tonight and go home and tell at least 5 people about this when you get an opportunity. You need to say, we got to listen to people that live out there in our backyard in the rest of Queensland. And this is what's actually happening. Because once we all leave, once we buckle, once Kilkeevan's gone, that's the beginning of the dominoes. It's just going to fall. Duk, 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 duk. There'll be once the coal industry's gone, and I can talk about that as well because my brother's in it, there will be nothing left. And they'll be expecting us to sit down here in the cities and you'll be eating crickets and soy patties because there will be no beef anymore. In the dark with rolling blackouts. So please jump on to Let's Rethink Renewables. It's a not-for-profit. We're all here in our own time. We're volunteering every single second that we give to this. If you can spare $10, please buy a core flute, put it on your fence. We need to get every single Aussie involved in this fight because if we don't, your backyard, my backyard, Australia's backyard, it's going to be destroyed soon. And that's why we developed the pillars of Let's Rethink Renewables. We say that there's 5 things in Australia. Once they're gone for good, and they're about to be destroyed by the rollout of the reckless renewables. And that is our Australian way of life. To me, that's the most important thing for all of us. Our rural landscapes, our wildlife habitats, our productive farmlands, and our strong communities. And I live in one of those, and what it's causing to our strong communities is unbelievable. There's people that won't speak to each other anymore because Joe down the road took a big payout, he's gone. I had a woman tell me recently she took a deal from a Chinese company. She doesn't care about Kilkeevan, her kids are grown up and gone, she's going to move to Caloundra. And that's what's happening. So we need to protect these places because it's your backyard. So please, help support Let's Rethink Renewables, but more than anything, spread this message. Tell every single person that you possibly get a chance to tell. That's why we're here today, to get the message out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katy. Thank you for all the work that you do. And don't go too far away, Katy, because you're going to be part of the Q&A now. Now, Katy has a copy of our prospectus and also a business survey that we did recently. Now, one of our committee members, Sasa McNaughton, was on foot through suburbs like Brookvale and Manly Vale and DY, asking businesses their reactions to rising electricity costs and what they had to do to be able to get through those rising costs. And they're turning off appliances, they're laying off staff, they're having reduced hours. Businesses are really starting to feel the brunt of what's happening in our communities. So it was a really interesting survey. You can go to our website to see the results. But one of the things that really stood out was that even though in the heart of a teal electorate like Warringah, where Brookvale is, over 66% of responders said that they support coal being reintroduced to the energy mix, and only 9% opposed it. So this narrative that's out there that teal voters are only voting for the teals on climate change, and that the big political parties like Labor and Liberal need to abandon coal, Well, this survey is telling the exact opposite. So please head to our website, spread that survey out there as best you can, and thank you to all our parliamentarians and speakers for accepting that survey, and hopefully you can talk about that in Parliament as well.
As rooftop solar increases, what will that do to power prices?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. It's definitely going to increase the total system cost. Malcolm mentioned total system cost, as did Nick and as did Colin. Total system cost, as those guys mentioned, covers the entire supply chain. So you might remember my slides. I had a colourful bar stack which just had a couple of items in it. There's some arguments that the renewables lobby has put forward which say more rooftop solar actually reduces power prices for everybody else. This is the basic standard of misinformation which needs to be combated, hopefully at one of these inquiries. What it does do is takes money out of the system. So the infrastructure all still exists. We're not putting rooftop solar on and turning generators off, taking transmission lines away. We're putting all this stuff on the roofs, which means people like me, I benefit from rooftop solar. Put it on about 10 years ago, and if you've got the money, you're basically mad not to because the prices keep going up. Surprise, surprise, why are we here? So some of the reasons are lost in the technical details of how it all works. But the reality is in your electricity bills. Even me with rooftop solar, my bills keep going up. Why is that? I should be immune from the bills, right? So there's a few reasons in the back, but the main one, think about it in terms of you're removing money from the system, but the system is still there and growing. So whoever's left is paying for it is paying more of the bill themselves.
If I could just make a comment in respect to that. Who's been to Norfolk Island? So you would have seen, solar panels are banned at Norfolk Island. You know why? Because the island runs on big diesel generators. So the cold rooms and everything that are there to keep the food for everybody on that island are run by the big diesel generators, and everybody contributes to the running cost of that. The reason that they've banned solar panels is that if they let everybody who lives in a house run their houses on solar panels and batteries and so forth, somebody's got to pay for the running of the diesel generator that runs all the big infrastructure and so forth at Norfolk Island. So that will increase the cost for a few people and not for another. So it's rather interesting, small niche scenario that is totally different to what we're experiencing here.
All right, the next question is from Malcolm. This one's from Elizabeth, and if once Malcolm's done, we can also have someone else have a go at it as well. How can we educate our MPs on this topic and challenge them in some way, the same way that Charlie Kirk did?
Australia is a constitutional monarchy, which means it's a republic. In a monarchy, a true monarchy, the king or queen give orders. They run the joint. In a constitutional monarchy, the chief governance instrument is the constitution. It's just like a republic. It's a rule of law. The monarch serves the people through the constitution. They have very limited powers. We are a constitutional monarchy, which means that we're a democracy, but a democracy will only succeed when it's active. The citizens are active. In Australia, the citizens are passive. And when they're passive, there comes apathy, and then the politicians start doing whatever they bloody well please. The only thing that will stop this is by citizens getting actively involved. That's the only thing. Hold people like me, Colin, accountable and push like hell. Just educate yourselves. And the other thing is to stop watching the media and spread the news, spread the information amongst your friends, your work colleagues, your sports colleagues, churchgoers. Spread the information that Ben and others are giving. Get involved politically yourself. I don't mean you don't have to join a party, but just get involved. And Katy's a politician. Katy's an activist. Steve's an activist. Steve's a politician. Do they hold office? No, they're not. But they're doing what citizens need to do in an active democracy. We are not an active democracy. More people like Steve and Katy will make this an active democracy. That's the only way to hold these bastards accountable.
with several of my colleagues, we are working actively in that space to convince our colleagues. It's very difficult. The internal politics is very complicated. Obviously, there is a bill before the House at the moment, the Abandoned Net Zero Bill. I seconded that bill. It was moved by Barnaby Joyce. Several of the colleagues in the lower house are all supportive and speaking to that bill. Matthew Canavan has moved the same bill in the Senate, as Malcolm would be aware. So we are doing our level best to try and turn things around, believe me.
Has it got any chance?
We will get defeated, absolutely get defeated. The government has the numbers on the floor, they will beat us. But the point to this whole thing is to expose the whole idea and the economic cost of net zero by 2050.
All right, this one's to Glenda from Stan. We have over 200 Indigenous organisations in Australia. So who and which groups are involved in Borumba and what are they doing?
That's a good question.
They're fighting and bickering, aren't they, Glenda?
Yeah. Kabi group are involved in negotiations. They actually have, and I can't remember which press release it was in, but they did mention that up the top proposed reservoir that there is some Indigenous special area. We don't know any details about it. We don't know whether that's part of the reasons of why they're reconsidering, but they certainly are active in being involved with the process. Just whether they've got enough to actually stop the project, I don't know. We don't know.
Okay, Nick, the renewables lobby is extremely powerful to the extent that they contribute strongly to the teals and other political groups. What can groups like Let's Rethink Renewables, and I suppose Coal Australia as well, learn from the renewable lobby and to be able to better combat what they're doing?
Yeah, good question. I think we just copy them. I mean, they've made the model. We have, the difference is we have the truth on our side and facts. That's what separates them from us. If you think about the numbers, there's now, depending on whose estimate you believe, capacity investment scheme is unsure how big that's going to be. It's an open check basically for renewable developers. Somewhere between $8 and $10 billion a year of taxpayer money going into subsidising intermittent wind and solar, which is effectively what's not just jacking up our electricity prices, why they've tripled in the last 15 years, but also what's jacking up our tax bills and why our tax bills are going through the roof. So somewhere between $8 and $10 billion. What do they spend? Well, Sunrise, raised 129 million. They spend about 75 in Australia, probably more. We don't see. Climate 200 spends 10, 15, probably 20 in an election campaign. That's a pretty small cost, right? If you look at it on a return investment case, if you're a renewable developer and you're going to get $8 to $10 billion of subsidies and you're going to put out, maybe $100 million, what a great return. So that's why they're doing it, right? It's, you take away the subsidies, you take away the renewables, you build coal. And you also get away from this issue of the amount of space you need. You just impact so many more people because the energy density of coal, nuclear gas is hundreds of times better than renewables. So you, by definition, which is why you got those maps, Stephen, in this brochure, showing you need most of Victoria, most of New South Wales.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Nick's exactly right. So the renewables lobbyies, the environmentalists, or the fake eco-warriors, as I call them, are also enabled by the bureaucrats and the politicians who have all bought into this, some present company excluded. They've created themselves this fabulous, warm, fuzzy echo chamber where they only talk to themselves. The same people have been involved in, privatising the New South Wales generators back in the 2000s, were then in the Energy Security Board and now in the Productivity Commission, all recommending the same rubbish. They're all failures. And they've all been there for a long time and they should know better. So I raise a flag at these bureaucracies because I see them as more as accomplices to bad decisions rather than safeguarding, because I think that part of their real job is actually, and you guys might be able to tell me about this, part of the real job of these, particularly the energy bureaucracies, should be to push back against bad ideas, not just to enable them unflinchingly. Is that what you think?
Yeah, again, this is deep-seated groupthink. So for an example, a few months ago, I rang a company called Ernst & Young, who you may have heard of, and what I asked them was I wanted a economic equilibrium paper written on the full system cost of renewable energy. So Ernst & Young are one of those big companies that do this sort of thing. To write this paper is in the vicinity of $250,000 to write it. They refused, and the excuse they gave me when I got to the top of Ernst & Young, to their executive, was that the cost of achieving net zero by 2050 would, or the benefits of reaching net zero, I should say, would far outweigh the costs. That's what they told me. So I said to the woman that said that to me, so I said, so you actually do know what the costs are then? And then, of course, she started to backpedal a fair bit. But this is the sort of thing we face with the corporate world that is earning a lot of money writing reports for the government in favour of these things versus our little group who wanted to spend $250,000 writing a factual report on what it was going to cost. And this is what makes it so complicated.
Okay, we can only squeeze in a couple more questions. Katy, is there a government website that tallies the total number of solar panels and wind turbines that are needed across Australia to get to net zero?
Well, not that I know of, but I can stand corrected on that, because if there is one, somebody please tell me. But if there was, there we go. Do you know where it is? Okay.
In about 2 weeks' time, a close colleague, Stephen Kowalski, has written an extensive report on all of this. He has mapped everything that we can find through every government agency, through every application that's been put. That will be launched on the 5th of October, I think it is. So you'll have to hang off for a couple of weeks, but we have done extensive mapping on it, yes.
I just wanted to add to that, Colin, that down in Central West Arana, Res, there, where a good mate of ours, Grant Piper and Emma Bowman are, they've estimated there's about 9 million panels going to go in there. 9 million. Just have a think about that for a second. And if I can add to that, that solar complex out where I am, it got absolutely smashed by hail a couple of years ago. Yep. Giant big holes straight through the panels. They all had to be removed. And guess where the new panels came from? Correct. 63 loads, had to wait for them to all come back from China. So I'd really like there to be a government-funded website that lists the emissions created by the production of all these panels and all these turbine blades with their balsa wood and their BPA and their resin and the concrete that goes in the ground that can never be recycled, that takes up, 10 house pads of concrete, and then let's add to that the number of panels that are proposed throughout the whole country and the emissions of all of that, plus the ships that chug all the way down through the Great Barrier Reef from China delivering the panels here to us, and then the semi-trailers that have to ship it out to the location. Like, think about it like that for a second. How much is the emissions total of all of that? Let's get a government website that details it all.
Yeah.
Look, just to give you a rough idea, there are literally millions and millions of solar panels. So there is one project in, what are we now, south-eastern Western Australia along the Great Australian Bight there. It's called the Western Green Energy Hub. So that one particular project, there are 60 million solar panels proposed there, and 3,000 wind turbines. That is just one project.
Okay, last question, and this is to Colin, and Malcolm might like your answer here, or we might not. We might already know Malcolm's answer for this, but Colin, have you, as a federal parliamentarian, ever been given the empirical scientific evidence that proves climate change?
No. I can assure you it doesn't exist. There is no comprehensive proof that carbon dioxide levels rising on this planet are causing climate change.
I want to add to that. I wrote a letter to Colin Boyce, knowing what his answer would be, and he said no, in writing. One of 10 people. So if you just hang on, I'm going to do a striptease act, only so far. If you hang on to that, please. Carbon dioxide tax. John Howard introduced the concept into this country. He was the first. Gillard lost her job over promising to not have a carbon dioxide tax, and she levied one. Malcolm Turnbull and Greg Hunt brought in the basis for a global carbon dioxide tax with the safeguard mechanism. And then Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen have ratcheted that up. We have a carbon dioxide tax here that's a direct carbon dioxide tax. Hang on, please, Nick.
We need some saucy music, Malcolm.
Now, the carbon dioxide tax is not just a direct tax. It's also an indirect tax. It's in everything you touch that requires carbon, which is steel, power, every piece of energy, diesel, transport, everything. Everything in our society runs on wheels. Everything in our society runs on steel. Everything in our society requires coal, because coal is in every steel component there is. So you're paying that directly and indirectly through the safeguard mechanism. When the safeguard mechanism is levied on the top 215 producers of carbon dioxide, that's a direct tax, because you, as the end consumer, pay that bill. That's why cost of living is astronomical in this country. It's because of the carbon dioxide tax. The next thing I want to point out is that I'm more worried about the intellectual climate than about the climate. Much more worried about it. But I'm even more worried about the lack of no debate. They won't debate. That means it's not science. But I want to raise something that's not been raised before tonight on today's session. Bob Carter and I, the late Professor Bob Carter, was a wonderful man. He and I were going around the country, along with many others, at our cost, speaking about this rubbish. One day Bob and I were just at a function, and we were just chewing the fat while we were having a break. And Bob said, "This has got to be the biggest scam ever." And I said, "Bob, it's not even close." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, the money scam. "What do you mean?" "The printing of money out of thin air runs the world." And then he said, "Yeah, you're right." And then I said, "But it's not the biggest." He said, "What's the biggest?" And I said, "The anti-human scam." That you think about it, everything in our government's propaganda, the Greens, is about how evil, greedy, rapacious, uncaring, irresponsible you are as humans. And we're feeding it into our kids when they pop out of mum's womb like that. From that age onwards, the anti-human scam. You're pests, you're parasites. Prince Philip even said something like that. When he dies and wants to come back, it'd be as a parasite, as a virus. This is absolutely crazy, because it's polluting the minds of our kids. And that's doing far more damage. And that is driven directly so that you will stop doing what you're doing, and you will kowtow to their global climate and environment protection agenda. It's all rubbish. It's all lies, but they're doing that to make you feel guilty and fearful of the doomsday and the fact that they say you're tearing up the planet. The fact that every one of us is sitting here right now means that someone cared for this lady, because there's no way you would have been here after a few days if someone didn't care for you. Every one of us shows that we care about humans. Someone's cared for us. Humans are the most caring animals, and what's more, we've got the most logical thinking processes, although sometimes you wonder it. But the fact is, humans care about the planet, they care about life, they care about humans. We are not uncaring, but that's the biggest lie that's been told, and we have got to educate our children to spread the word. We are wonderful, loving, caring people who just need to use our bloody reason.
On that note, we need to wrap up, unfortunately, but thank you to all of our lovely speakers. A great day, tremendous information. Thank you to all of you for coming here and being part of this. We need people like you to come to these events, so thank you very much. Have a safe trip home, and we'll see you all next time.